Ned Stark stood on the balcony of the Tower of the Hand, every fiber of him tense. The narrow streets and high white walls of King's Landing sprawled below, torches winking in the dusk. The city's unsettled noise rose in a steady rumble, the clamor of merchants closing their shops, distant curses of tradesmen hauling crates and barrels, the laughter of tavern patrons leaning outdoors to catch the first breath of cooler evening air. Here, at the seat of the Seven Kingdoms, everything was always in motion, as though the city itself were a living beast, intent on devouring all who set foot within. Yet Ned found his thoughts drifting far from this place. He let his gaze wander up to the sky, where the first stars began to glimmer, and he recalled the crisp nights in Winterfell, where the wind smelled of pine and snow and the watchman's horn calls sounded more lonely than loud. If only he could be back in the north, far from this nest of secrets and treachery. But there was no turning back. Too many discoveries had shaken him since he'd arrived in King's Landing. The truth about Robert's children, that they were not, in fact, Robert's at all, lay like a blade at his throat. He had uncovered a monstrous secret. The boy Prince Joffrey was not the son of King Robert Baratheon, but a product of Queen Cersei's incest with her brother Jaime. It was treason to speak of it, yet a far greater treason was committed in the forging of that lie. Ned knew duty demanded that he confront the king with the truth, however perilous that might be. Yet something else weighed on his heart, a secret he had borne for nearly 15 years. It was the promise he'd made to his dying sister in the bloodied bed of the Tower of Joy. It was the reality of Jon Snow's parentage, the boy Ned had claimed as his own bastard, a brand upon his honor that burned more each year. The truth was that Jon was not his at all, but the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark. She had made Ned promise to protect the boy, keep him hidden from the wrath of those who would slaughter any child with Targaryen blood. Now, as Ned considered the chaos about to erupt if Robert discovered Cersei's deception, he realized that the moment to safeguard Jon might have arrived. The only choice might be to reveal the truth before all else was lost. Ned closed his eyes and listened to his own breathing, steady yet tinged with dread. Robert Baratheon, his oldest friend, hated the Targaryen name more than anything. He had risked everything to wage a war to end House Targaryen, but only two had escaped, Viserys and the girl Daenerys, across the narrow sea. If Robert discovered that Ned had harbored another Targaryen all these years, he might react with a fury that no words could quell. And yet, after uncovering the incest of the Lannisters, the question that pressed on Ned's heart was whether Robert had become so jaded, so drowned in wine and hollow victories, that he might set aside his old hatred and instead seize upon the Targaryen blood within Jon to claim some advantage, or perhaps to rectify the monstrous situation that had befallen him. It was a faint hope, but a hope nonetheless. He turned from the balcony and re-entered the Tower of the Hand, the corridor behind him dimly lit by torches. His footsteps echoed as he trudged to his solar. The hush of the hallway seemed to measure out his anxiety in each step. Tomorrow he would speak to Robert. Tonight, he would gather his thoughts and prepare for the storm this confession would unleash. He prayed to the old gods that somehow he could keep his promise to protect Jon. Let it be enough. He opened the door to his solar and found Jory Castle standing by the window, arms folded. Jory bowed his head. "Lord Stark, you've been out there a long time." Ned nodded absently and closed the door. "We all walk through the night sometimes," he said, "but I fear I have done so for too long. Tomorrow I speak to the king." Jory's eyes flickered with worry. "Should we post extra men? King's Landing can be dangerous when truths are told." Ned gave his loyal captain of the guard a faint, grim smile. "Yes, do so quietly. We need not parade steel about the Red Keep, but I'll not walk unguarded. This city is full of shadows that have teeth." Jory dipped his head. "As you say, my lord." Alone again after Jory departed, Ned dropped onto a wooden chair beside the fire and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. His fingers pressed against his forehead as though to keep his pounding thoughts contained. He pictured Jon, broad-shouldered and solemn at 14, with a softness about the eyes inherited from Lyanna. He remembered how Jon had looked as a child, puzzling over some page in a book or wrestling with Robb in the snow, his breath steaming in the winter air. Jon was quiet, honorable, bearing a sense of justice that might well have come from Ned's own fatherly influence. But in the blackness of his hair and the set of his jaw, Ned could see the Targaryen legacy that none had recognized. perhaps only because it was so carefully hidden beneath the boy's assumed status as Ned Stark's bastard. What might become of him once the truth was known? And what might become of Sansa and Arya, safe in the Red Keep only by virtue of Ned's position? And Robb, Bran, Rickon, and Catelyn all in Winterfell so far away? Could he risk the fury of Robert Baratheon if that old hatred flared anew? Ned rubbed his temples. King's Landing had been stifling enough with the burden of falsehood. Tomorrow would be the day of truth. He rose, crossing to the fireplace, and fed another log to the flames. Then he knelt before the small chest near his desk. From it, he withdrew a folded piece of parchment. The final letter from Jon Arryn, found after the man's death, with those ominous words that had led Ned down this path. The seed is strong. Jon Arryn had died for his knowledge of the truth. At least Ned would try to choose the ground of this confrontation more carefully. He closed the chest and stood, letting the flickering firelight illuminate the wariness in his face. 1,000 images danced in his mind. Lyanna's pale face, stricken with fever as she pleaded with him in a voice hoarse from pain. Robert's triumphant grin after the Battle of the Trident, the rubies from Rhaegar's breastplate lost in the swirling river. The silent promise in Ned's heart to do what was honorable even if the cost were dear. He felt as if he stood at a precipice gazing into a darkness without end. Still, he reminded himself, winter is coming and with it truths that cannot be denied. In the morning, Ned rose early. He kept his face stony during breakfast, only offering Sansa and Arya gentle reminders to attend to their day's lessons. Sansa seemed radiant with her engagement to Prince Joffrey, but Ned's stomach twisted at the memory of the boy's parentage. Arya, sullen with her strange newness to the capital, gave Ned a suspicious look. She sensed something amiss, no doubt, but Ned hoped to shield her as best he could. He summoned Jory and a small retinue of northern guardsmen, but he did not clothe himself in armor, nor did he strap on the heavy steel longsword. Instead, he wore simple but dignified garments, a gray doublet embroidered with the dire wolf of House Stark and a short cloak pinned with the hand of the king's badge. If there was to be a confrontation, it would be one of words, not blades, at least not on his side. They walked through the corridors of the Red Keep, passing gold cloaks and petitioners until they reached the royal apartments. There, in a small reception hall with high, narrow windows, King Robert Baratheon was devouring a platter of boiled eggs and burnt bacon, washing it down with ale when Ned arrived. Robert's eyes lit up momentarily at the sight of his old friend, though there was a heaviness in the king's countenance, an invisible weight pressing upon the man who had once seemed unstoppable. "Gods, Ned," Robert boomed around a mouthful of bacon, "you always look like you swallowed a lemon. Sit, damn you. Eat. Or are you here to put me to work? I've already spent half the morning dealing with these cursed petitioners who can't wipe their own arses without the crown's permission." Ned bowed, then took a seat across from Robert. The king looked tired indeed. Lines had carved themselves around his eyes. "Your Grace," Ned said, "I come with news that cannot wait." Robert slurped from his tankard, some ale trickling down his bearded chin. "I should hope so. It's too early in the day for gossip." "It's not gossip." Ned swallowed. His heart pounded. "I've discovered something dire about your children." The king's ale slopped as Robert slammed the cup onto the table. He gestured impatiently. "Out with it." Ned lowered his voice, though no one else was in the room except 2 silent Kingsguards stationed at the door. It is no secret that Jon Arryn spent his final days searching old records, investigating the traits of Baratheon offspring. "The seed is strong," he kept saying. "He discovered that none of your so-called children bear any trace of Baratheon features." Robert frowned, lips twisting. His brow furrowed. "What are you saying?" "Of course they have the lion's share of their mother's coloring. Cersei is a Lannister after all." "But that is precisely it." Ned resisted the urge to wipe the sweat forming on his temples. "Every trueborn Baratheon for hundreds of years has had black hair. Stannis has it. Renly has it. Your bastards," he paused, measuring Robert's reaction, "they all have it too." Robert's face darkened in sudden anger. "My bastards? You've been rummaging in my bedchamber, have you?" But Ned saw the recognition behind those eyes, the old guilt and the knowledge that yes, Robert Baratheon had fathered many children out of wedlock, and all had his dark hair, his strong jaw, the look of a Baratheon. "You're not making sense," Robert said, though he sounded defensive, as if he suspected exactly where Ned was going. "Joffrey, Myrcella, Tommen, they all have golden hair, your grace. The exact color of Jaime Lannister's hair." Ned forced himself to speak calmly, though his heart thundered. "I believe they are not your children at all, but the product of Cersei's incest with her brother." For a span of moments, the only sound in the chamber was Robert's heavy breathing. His face went from flushed to pale, anger contorting his features. One of the Kingsguard shifted uncomfortably. Robert's meaty hand reached for the tankard again, as though searching for comfort and drink, but he hesitated. He stared at Ned with wild, bloodshot eyes. You dare accuse my queen of betting her brother? To produce gods. He trailed off, and Ned could see a part of him break inside. At last Robert roared, out. Both of you, out. The Kingsguard vanished, leaving them alone. Robert slammed his fist against the table, sending the remains of his breakfast skittering. Do you know what you're saying? By all the gods, do you even realize? I do. And I know how dangerous it is. Jon Arryn died for it. You must believe me, Robert. I have proof. The old records. Gendry the armorer's apprentice, the boy in the brothel, all of them have your black hair, your looks. Yet the children raised in the palace have no hint of Baratheon. They are Jaime's, not yours. Robert's breathing had become ragged. Cersei, that bitch? He broke off. It looked as though he might lunge for a weapon, kill someone, or faint from sheer wrath. Then, trembling, he stood. You realize that means. Joffrey is not mine. The next in line, there is no rightful heir from my marriage. By the gods, Ned. Ned exhaled. The most perilous moment lay ahead. Your Grace, he said quietly. If you need further reason to believe me, ask Lord Stannis. He suspected something as well and was investigating with Jon Arryn. But Robert, there is more. This secret, it begs another confession from me. One that I have borne for 15 years. Robert paused in his fury, confusion flickering across his features. You, a secret? Yes. Ned's mouth felt dry as dust. He thought of Lyanna's tears, her trembling hand in his, the hush in that lonely tower as daylight spilled through a narrow window onto blood-soaked sheets. He remembered the baby's first cry. He remembered that quiet promise he'd spoken to his sister. It concerns the name Targaryen. Robert's eyebrows shot up, his hand curling into a fist once more. What are you talking about? By the gods. I've heard enough about the dragon spawn to last a lifetime. Ned cleared his throat. He needed to say the words carefully, but the time for caution had already passed. Jon Snow is not my son, not my bastard. He is the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark. Robert's jaw unhinged, as though something vital inside him threatened to burst. He almost spat, then froze, eyeing Ned with a mixture of disbelief and raw anger. Your sister and that damnable dragon prince? Ned, this is impossible. I loved Lyanna. We were to wed. She would never. Then the realization. You claim that boy is the rightful child of Rhaegar Targaryen. Your nephew? All these years you let him live, claiming him as your bastard. Ned nodded, sensing the danger in Robert's tone. I did. Lyanna made me swear to protect him, to keep him safe from your wrath. Yes, from your hatred of Targaryens. She died in my arms, and I promised her, Robert, you knew how I loved my sister. I would not let her last wish go unanswered. Robert reeled. He stared at Ned as if he beheld a stranger. You protected a Targaryen? I killed Rhaegar, Ned. I caved in his breastplate with my warhammer. I would have killed every last one of his spawn to end that line forever. Did you never think of telling me? His voice dropped with a lethal hiss, so full of betrayal that Ned's breath caught. All these years, my best friend, my brother in arms, was hiding the son of the man I hated above all others. My enemy. Ned braced himself. I did it to keep him safe. Rhaegar raped my sister, so I believed at the time. But Lyanna, she never spoke ill of him in those last hours. He swallowed. Telling the full truth was perhaps more than Robert could handle. She loved him, Robert. It was not how we believed. She was frightened, but not of him. She was frightened of the realm's reaction, and your reaction. I never told you because if you had known, you would have killed the boy, and my sister's memory would be tarnished. This is the truth. I swear it on my honor. I do not ask for your forgiveness. I ask only that you show mercy. Robert's face twitched with conflicting emotions. At length, he dropped back into his seat and pressed his hands to his brow. For a moment, he said nothing. The tension in the air was suffocating. At last, Robert let out a shuddering breath. "My gods, Ned. It's as if the ground has cracked beneath me. I have no true heir from Cersei. And you're telling me there's a Targaryen in your own house raised alongside your true-born children." He let out a hollow laugh. "Is this some twisted jest of the gods to punish me for my sins? Have I grown so fat, so useless, that the entire realm is mocking me?" Ned reached out as if to clasp Robert's forearm, but the king pulled away. "Jon has grown up thinking himself your bastard, eh? And you wish me to what? Recognize him? Give him the throne? The Iron Throne that I took from the Mad King with my own hammer." "Not the throne," Ned said. "Your Grace, I have no interest in putting Rhaegar's son on the throne. I wish only for him to be safe. The truth weighs heavy on me. But if you intend to denounce the children you believe to be yours, the realm will be in uproar. Civil war could erupt. We must be careful. The knowledge of Jon's parentage might help us. Or it may ruin everything." Robert's anger flared and ebbed again. "You speak in riddles, Ned. Are you telling me that we have an alternative heir in Jon Targaryen? Are you asking me to name him by the gods? That is unthinkable. Even if I threw Cersei and her brood to the wolves, do you imagine the lords of the realm would accept a Targaryen to follow me? I spent half my life trying to wipe out that name." Ned's voice grew firmer. "Then what do you suggest we do, Robert? Acknowledge that your children are bastards, letting the crown pass to Stannis? That may be your right, but the Lannisters would not take kindly to it. War might be the only outcome. Yet if you recognize Jon's parentage, if you believe the rumor that Rhaegar's lawful marriage was annulled to wed Lyanna in secret, he might even be the rightful heir. Some would flock to that banner, especially those still loyal to the Targaryen name." At this, Robert let out a barking laugh. "You think I'd let the boy of Rhaegar Targaryen become king of the Seven Kingdoms? Gods, you must have lost your wits. I will not hand the realm back to the dragons. I am king of the Seven Kingdoms, and I'll remain so until I die." Then his expression turned almost pleading. "Ned, you were my brother once. By the gods, I loved Lyanna. This is too great a betrayal. Do you realize the position you've put me in? The Lannisters are as cunning as ever. My own queen has deceived me. Now you bring me this monstrous revelation. I cannot." He covered his face with one broad hand. Ned let him sit in silence for a moment. Sunlight cut through the windows high above, illuminating the dust motes that spun in the hush. Finally, Ned said, "I told you because I trust you still, Robert. In my own heart, you remain the friend I followed into war. Do not punish Jon for the sins of his father. Rhaegar is dead. The boy is innocent. You have a chance to do better than Aerys, better than the Lannisters." Robert sat unmoving, breathing heavily. Then he raised his eyes to Ned, thick with anger and sorrow. "I won't kill the boy. I'm not so cold as that. But I'll not parade him around King's Landing as the rightful heir to the throne. If the realm even suspected he carried Targaryen blood, half of them would rally to him, the other half would want his head on a spike. Either way, war." He heaved himself to his feet, paced a few steps, arms folded as though he meant to throttle something. "We'll deal with the matter of Cersei first. By the gods, it's her treachery that has undone me. As for the boy, I'll do this. Keep your secret so long as you keep him out of my sight. Keep him in the north wherever you will. But do not speak of him as Rhaegar's get, not to anyone. If it were made public, I'd have no choice but to denounce him or to consider him a threat." He turned and glared. "Do you understand me, Ned?" Ned bowed his head. His breath came shaky, yet relief flooded him. Robert had not condemned Jon to die. That was, in its own way, a miracle. "I do, Your Grace." Robert's nod was stiff. "Now leave me. Gods, I need time to think. But, Ned, if you ever speak of this again or if word reaches the realm, I'll not be able to stay my wrath. I don't want this to tear us apart, but so be it." Ned rose. "You are the king," he said softly, turning to go. The tension in the air made Ned's legs feel hollow as he walked. Once outside, he inhaled the corridor's cooler air with a trembling exhalation. Jory was there, eyes watchful. Ned nodded that all was well enough, though in truth, it might never be well again. By nightfall, word had spread that the king was in a foul mood. Whispers circulated through the Red Keep that Robert had engaged in a vicious quarrel with the queen and had stormed out of her chambers, bellowing curses that echoed across the torchlit halls. Ned was not surprised. The truth once told was a bitter medicine, with aftertastes that lingered. He secluded himself in his solar, heart full of the day's events, while Sansa and Arya supped alone in their rooms. He had no desire to dine at the royal table that evening, not when so much had been brought to light. Outside his window, the night was quiet, but in that hush Ned felt a swirl of anxiety. Cersei Lannister, dangerous as any lioness, was cornered. Robert's fury might lead him to a swift confrontation, and the Lannisters would not go quietly. Ned feared bloodshed was on the horizon. The next day began with a shock. A message arrived that King Robert, in a fit of rage, had gone hunting earlier than planned, ignoring pleas from his courtiers to remain in the city. He took only a handful of guardsmen and a few sycophants who never refused him. No doubt he needed an escape, a place to vent his anger away from prying eyes. Ned stared at the sealed parchment in disbelief. Robert's abrupt departure left the city in an uneasy hush. The king was gone, the queen hidden in her chambers, and the realm's power precariously poised. Ned thought of going to Cersei to glean how far Robert's confrontation had gone, but quickly dismissed the idea. She would be as feral as a cornered direwolf and perhaps twice as dangerous. Instead, he busied himself with the mundane duties of the Hand of the King, hearing petitions, meeting with the small council, forging alliances with lords who had come to the capital for various reasons. But each step through the Red Keep brought another wave of rumors that Robert would move to annul his marriage, that the Queen had locked herself in the royal apartments, or that the Lannisters were mobilizing. Ned went to the small council to see how they reacted. There, he found Lord Renly with a furrowed brow, Peter Baelish with his mocking smirk, Varys wearing a worried expression, and Grand Maester Pycelle dozing intermittently. "It seems the king has found a poor time to go off hunting," Renly said, twisting a ring on his finger. "These are uncertain days, Lord Stark. If the queen has angered him, we must be prepared for her retribution." Varys inclined his head in that smooth, unsettling way. "Indeed, my lord. The queen's pride is not to be underestimated. Her father, Lord Tywin, is rumored to have a long reach from Casterly Rock." Littlefinger smiled thinly. "And let us not forget that a wounded lion tends to strike hard. The king's displeasure might push her to desperate acts." Ned listened, all the while feeling the weight of his own secrets. Part of him wished Robert had not stormed away before they could hammer out a plan for dealing with Cersei. The seeds of chaos were already taking root. He gave the others a curt nod, ended the council meeting swiftly with a few formalities, and returned to his chambers in the Tower of the Hand. As dusk fell again, Ned paced restlessly. He felt sure the city was on a knife's edge. Sansa was pouting in her room, upset that Joffrey was nowhere to be found. He was apparently holed up with his mother, or perhaps with the Hound at his side, skulking in the training yard. Arya had gone to practice her water dancing with Syrio Farrell, a bright spot in an otherwise grim day. Ned expected ravens to fly in at any moment with news of the king's doings or with demands from Tywin Lannister himself. The news that arrived instead was far worse. Jory brought a breathless messenger to Ned's solar. The man was caked in dust from the road, his chest heaving as he knelt. "Your Grace, my Lord Hand, apologies, I bring tidings from the king's hunt." "Speak," Ned urged. The messenger's eyes were wide. The king was gravely wounded by a boar. Some say he was too drunk and the boar gored him. Ser Barristan Selmy and a few others managed to bring him back to camp. He yet lives for now. Ned's vision swam. Robert struck down by a boar. A swirl of memory took him back to another day, another hunt, but never had he imagined Robert's legendary strength would fail him. "Where is he?" he managed. "They're bringing him to the Red Keep. He should arrive by the morrow." Ned felt a wave of dread. "Gather the maesters," he ordered Jory. "We must prepare. He will need every ounce of healing skill the realm can muster." Jory bowed and left with the messenger. Ned stood there, heart pounding. The moment was at hand. If Robert were to die now, everything they had dreaded would come crashing down in the form of a succession crisis. Cersei's children were not his true heirs. Stannis was Robert's lawful heir if the king died without acknowledging the bastardy of Joffrey. And then there was Jon. If the realm discovered his Targaryen blood, gods, it could tear the Seven Kingdoms apart. Or the Lannisters would make their move to place Joffrey on the throne anyway, ignoring the truth. Blood would flow no matter which path was chosen. That night was the darkest Ned had ever spent in King's Landing. He did not sleep. He stood at his balcony, gazing across the flickering lights of the city. The air felt thick with tension. The smell of the sea mingled with smoke and sewage. Far below, the common folk retired to cramped hovels, unaware that their realm might soon be plunged into chaos. Ned prayed to the old gods, prayed that Robert might recover, that fate might grant them time to set things to rights. But in his heart, he sensed that a swirl of unstoppable events was descending upon them. Come morning, King Robert arrived on a litter. He was delirious, pale, and had lost a frightening amount of blood. The boar's tusk had ripped into his side, leaving an ugly wound. Grand Maester Pycelle clucked over him with potions and poultices. Ned waited outside the king's bedchamber, heart-hammering. After an eternity, Pycelle emerged, wiping sweat from his brow, and shook his head gravely. The king was dying. Ned was allowed inside, though. He entered the chamber, thick with the stench of blood and the sweetness of medicinal herbs. Robert lay on the bed, still enormous yet reduced by pain, his face beaded with sweat, breath a ragged rasp. Cersei stood nearby, silent, her expression sullen. Joffrey hovered at the foot of the bed, looking both fascinated and horrified, while Myrcella and Tommen were absent. The King's Guard were posted around them, but Ned felt none of their usual discipline. A hush of dread suffused the room. When Robert saw Ned, he managed a weak smile. "Come closer, damn it, I can hardly see," he rasped. Ned stepped to the bedside. "Robert," he said softly. The king's eyes fluttered. "Gods be good, that boar got me good. Should've, never tried to hunt, half in my cups." A bitter chuckle that turned to a cough. "Sosie." He looked toward her, but her gaze flicked away. He turned back to Ned. "We had words, Ned. But none of that matters now. I know the truth. I know it all. I will not have a Lannister spawn sitting the throne. I made you hand. You must see to it." Cersei stirred, eyes flashing. "My lord husband," she said coldly. "It is a pity it's come to this. Let me bring you some wine." Robert's arm trembled as he lifted a meaty hand to grip Ned's wrist. "Let her be," he gasped. I told her I'd pass the throne to Stannis. He is my brother. He not those golden-haired pups." He let out a rattling breath. "Ned, swear it to me that you'll make sure no Targaryen or Lannister sits where I sat. The realm must remain mine." His eyes, bloodshot, flickered with suspicion, with old hatred. "No Targaryen. Promise me that, Ned." Ned's throat constricted. He felt the weight of his vow to Lyanna, the memory of how Robert had raged at Targaryens, the fragile promise that had let Jon live. Now Robert was demanding that Ned deny Jon his birthright, if such a birthright ever threatened the Baratheon hold on the throne. Yet Robert was dying. Would it matter? If Ned swore, he would be lying. If he refused, he would crush his friend's last moment of hope. He forced himself to speak. "I promise you I will keep the realm safe, Robert. I promise I will do what is right for the Seven Kingdoms." Robert's eyes dimmed. Good. A tremor passed through him. "Write it down. Let me sign." Ned took up a parchment, as was custom for the king to leave a last testament. He wrote the words of the king's command that Ned Stark would serve as protector of the realm until Robert's rightful heir. Here, Ned paused, remembering that Robert had acknowledged no rightful heir from his marriage came of age. He did not name Stannis explicitly, though that was Robert's wish. He left the phrase ambiguous, hoping to buy time, unsure how the matter of succession would truly play out. Robert, in his delirium, did not notice the subtlety. The king held the quill with shaking fingers, scrawled a half-legible signature, then slumped back. "I'll give the realm to you." "Ned," he murmured. "Take it, protect it." His breath rattled. Cersei shot Ned a glare, but said nothing, for Robert had not forced the name of Stannis onto the parchment in her presence. Outside the bedchamber, Ned left the document with the royal seal in safekeeping, then went to gather the small council. It was time to plan for the king's inevitable passing. He didn't see the point in illusions anymore. Robert's wound was mortal. He encountered Peter Baelish in the corridor, wearing a sardonic smile. "So our poor king is to leave us," Littlefinger said with a sigh. "What a pity. So many changes at court. But you must be relieved, Lord Stark. The burden falls on your shoulders now." Ned eyed him warily. "We must secure the city. The Gold Cloaks must be loyal to the crown, not the Lannisters." "Ah, the Gold Cloaks. That can be arranged." Peter's mocking amusement did not comfort Ned in the least. "I've made many friends among them." Ned forced his shoulders to straighten. "Then see it done. We cannot risk a coup." As the day passed, word spread that the king was near death. Cersei retreated, though Ned heard rumors she was meeting privately with Lord Tywin's men. More unsettling news came that Tyrion Lannister was rumored to be heading south after being freed from Catelyn Stark's imprisonment in the Vale. Ned wondered how that might shift the Lannisters' strategy. That evening, Robert Baratheon died. The ravens were sent with the official notice to all corners of the realm, and King's Landing fell into a hush of expectation, waiting to see who would take the Iron Throne. The funeral and final rites were delayed until the question of succession could be settled. Ned, with the authority Robert had granted him as protector of the realm, met with the small council behind closed doors. They convened in the council chamber with its towering windows and long table. The painted table was far away in Dragonstone, but Ned felt a keen sense of how the realm stood poised on the brink of civil war. Cersei arrived with Joffrey and a contingent of Lannister guards. Varys, Littlefinger, Renly, and Pycelle were in attendance, along with a few lords who had been lurking in the capital. The tension was thick as new-forged steel. Cersei, dressed in black silk, her golden hair coiled with small rubies, took her seat with an air of finality. "My husband is dead," she said, voice edged with venom. "May the gods keep his soul. But the time for mourning is brief. Joffrey is the eldest son of the king. He will sit the Iron Throne." Renly opened his mouth to protest, then shut it, glancing at Ned. Ned rose, handing forth Robert's signed testament. "The king named me protector of the realm until his heir is of age." By Robert's own words. He unrolled the parchment, presenting it for the others to see. Cersei's green eyes flickered across the lines. She snatched it up and scanned it. "I see no mention of my son by name. An oversight, I trust." She glared at Ned. "One that can easily be amended." Ned spoke calmly. "We cannot name Joffrey as heir, your grace. The king discovered something before his death. Those children you bore are not of his blood, but of your brothers." A shocking stillness fell over the chamber. Varys fidgeted. Renly avoided meeting Cersei's gaze. Littlefinger arched an eyebrow, and the Lannister guards stiffened. Joffrey blanched but then scowled fiercely. "My father told me I am his heir," he barked, voice quavering between anger and fear. Cersei's hands gripped the parchment so tightly it tore at the edges. "You dare repeat that lie, Lord Stark? My children are Baratheons, each and every one. Do you see me wearing any color but mourning black? My husband is dead, and you repay his memory with slander." Ned felt the impulse to step back, but he steadied himself. "I have proof. The Baratheon blood runs black of hair and strong of jaw. None of your children match that inheritance." Robert knew. Cersei shot to her feet. "You traitor!" She flung the parchment at Ned. "Guards, seize!" But Renly slammed his hand on the table. "Guards, hold!" He turned to Ned. "My brother named you protector, Lord Stark. What is your counsel?" Ned took a breath. "The rightful heir is Robert's eldest trueborn brother, Stannis Baratheon. By all the laws of the realm, he should claim the throne if Robert left no true heirs." Joffrey let out a shout of outrage, tears of fury in his eyes. "Mother, are we just going to stand here?" he said. "I am king. I should have them all killed." Cersei's expression was thunderous. Her retinue of Lannister guards was outnumbered in the chamber by the King's Guard and the gold cloaks that Littlefinger had apparently aligned with Ned, for the moment at least. She hissed, "If you do this, Ned Stark, you condemn yourself. My father will not stand by while you spout these lies. The realm will bleed." Ned's voice was heavy. "I do not wish the realm to bleed. I only speak the truth Robert discovered. And though I know it will bring war, we cannot let a bastard ascend the throne." A moment's hush, then, "Enough!" shrieked Joffrey, face twisted in rage. He turned to the Lannister guards. "Kill them if they resist. I am the king." The guard captain looked uncertain. The King's Guard, Barristan Selmy, in particular, stood, eyes fierce with a sense of duty that overrode the boy's outburst. Peter Baelish watched with a half-smile, as though waiting to see which side would prove stronger. The tension broke with the sound of steel as a handful of Lannister men moved to protect Cersei, while Renly and the gold cloaks interposed themselves. For several heartbeats, it seemed the entire kingdom might unravel into violence right there. Then Renly drew breath and shouted, "Stand down! In the name of the late king, I command all men to keep their blades sheathed." Ned placed a hand on the hilt of his own sword, quietly reminding the Lannisters he was not unarmed. For once, they hesitated, Cersei included. The fight had not started, though violence shimmered in the air like heat off sun-baked stone. Varys broke the silence, voice trembling with forced calm. "My lords, bloodshed in these halls will serve no one. The people will not look kindly on a slaughter in the Red Keep. Perhaps a compromise can be reached while we discuss matters further." Cersei's eyes were cold. "What compromise is there, Spider?" Varys spread his hands. "We could, for instance, send an envoy to Dragonstone, inviting Lord Stannis to present his claim. Meanwhile, Prince Joffrey, if we might still call him that, remains in the capital under protective watch to ensure no harm befalls him until the matter is settled. Joffrey's lip curled. I will not stand for this. I am king. But he found no immediate champion in the present gathering, besides his mother, whose forces were insufficient. They were in a precarious stalemate. Finally, Cersei let out a low hiss. Very well, she said. So quietly Ned almost didn't hear her. But know this, House Lannister will not yield to you or to that crab Stannis. And you will pay for this indignity. With that, she swept from the room, her retinue falling in behind her like a gilded tide. Joffrey followed, trembling with fury. Ned, feeling like he had just averted an explosion, sagged into a chair. Renly turned to him, face shining with sweat. Seven, save us. This is going to tear the kingdom apart. Cersei will never submit. We'll have to bring Stannis here and hold the city until he can assert his claim. The Lannisters will respond with force. And Tywin Lannister never does things by halves. Ned only nodded, the weight of the realm's future settling on him like a millstone. If Tywin mustered an army, war would be unstoppable. And that was without factoring in the final secret Ned carried, Jon's Targaryen blood. If the realm discovered that the Targaryen line lived in Winterfell, that might either unite them behind a new cause or inflame new factions. That evening, Ned sent ravens north to Winterfell, urging Robb to prepare the bannermen but not yet to march. He also wrote to Stannis at Dragonstone, encouraging him to come forward as the rightful heir, though Ned suspected Stannis might be suspicious of any letter from him. Nonetheless, the die was cast. In the days that followed, King's Landing became a cauldron of tension. The Lannisters withdrew to their quarters. The Gold Cloaks pledged to protect Ned Stark and the small council's authority, though Peter Baelish's loyalty wavered like a breeze-blown candle. Varys's whispers told of Lannister riders galloping west, presumably to muster troops from Casterly Rock. Sansa and Arya were confined to the Tower of the Hand for their own safety, and Ned forbade them from wandering the city. He feared kidnappings or worse. Meanwhile, banners from the Reach and the Stormlands trickled into the capital, uncertain where their loyalties should lie. Mace Tyrell might waver, preferring to stay out of this internal Baratheon-Lannister conflict, but Tywin Lannister's next move loomed as the greatest threat. Letters flew from King's Landing to the Eyrie, to the Riverlands, to Dorne. Everyone would have to choose a side soon. The realm teetered on the cusp of a conflagration, and in the hidden corners of Ned's thoughts was Jon. He had written to Catelyn, instructing her to keep Jon hidden away, perhaps even sending him to the Wall if necessary. A Targaryen on the Wall might be as safe as one could be from Robert's heirs and from the realm's suspicion. Only a handful of Ned's men even knew. But he dreaded what might happen if the boy discovered his own parentage, if rumors spread. Already there were stirrings that Daenerys Targaryen across the sea had married a Dothraki Khal. If the realm discovered that another Targaryen was in the north, it might spark an entirely different war. News came that Stannis was mustering ships and men on Dragonstone, though when he might sail was unclear. Some lords murmured that Renly should take the throne, for he was younger and more charming. Ned bristled at the notion Stannis was the lawful heir, whatever his flaws. He could not abide more deception. Cersei, meanwhile, wrote letters far and wide to proclaim Joffrey as the true king, anointed by the faith. With the High Septon dead of old age, a new High Septon in the city was carefully chosen, one rumored to favor gold over truth. The city itself braced for turmoil. Bread grew scarce and prices rose. Whispers from Flea Bottom told of restlessness among the small folk who only wanted peace and fair prices. Ned found himself at the heart of it all, protector of the realm in name, but in practice, simply the gravest target of Lannister vengeance. He could trust only a handful of people, the men of the north who had accompanied him, Ser Barristan and Selmy, whose honor shone bright, though even that might be tested, and perhaps the newly arrived Serar. Odric Castle, who had come from Winterfell bearing letters. Through it all, Ned felt a longing for the cold, honest snows of the north, for the heart tree in Winterfell's Godswood, for the comforting presence of his family. But there was no escaping King's Landing until the matter of the throne was resolved. One day, hopefully soon, Stannis would arrive. Then the lines would be drawn openly. But war came faster than expected. A rider thundered through the city gates one afternoon, proclaiming that Tywin Lannister's forces had taken up arms and begun ravaging the Riverlands, burning villages loyal to House Tully, no doubt a move to provoke or intimidate Ned's wife's family. Another rumor said Jaime Lannister had assembled a host at Harrenhal. The watchers on the city walls saw the smoke plumes in the distance. Ned called a war council. Men in half armor, emblazoned with the stag or direwolf, crowded the chamber. Renly was present, looking disturbed but resolved. Ser Barristan wore his white cloak, face grave. Varys lingered at the edges, quiet as a shadow. Littlefinger, perched by the window, flicked imaginary dust from his velvet sleeve. "We cannot let the Lannisters' aggression go unanswered," Ned declared. "They defy the King's Testament. We must protect the realm from their depredations." Renly rubbed his chin. "Stannis is not yet here. How many men can we muster in the city?" "A fraction of what Tywin has," one of the Stormland Knights said. "He has half the west behind him, maybe 30,000 men." Ned's heart sank. King's Landing might have a garrison of a few thousand. The Gold Cloaks might number 2,000 more. Even with the banners that had trickled in, it was not enough to confront Tywin in open battle. They needed the forces of the North or the Vale. But the Vale was under Lisa Arryn's rule, and she had proven reluctant to get involved, nursing her own paranoia. The North was far away, though Robb might march if Catelyn could muster the banners. But that would take time, possibly weeks, to converge on the Riverlands. Ser Barristan's voice cut through the clamor. "Might we treat with Lord Tywin? Offer parley to avoid the slaughter?" Littlefinger let out a snort. "Tywin's not one for parley unless he's the one dictating terms. He'd demand we acknowledge Joffrey's claim. And if we refuse, well, we know how that ends." Ned grimaced. "We need time. If we stay behind these walls until Stannis arrives, it might be the best chance. The city is defensible, though the small folk may starve if siege is laid. And the Lannisters, in the meantime, ravage the countryside." The men spoke back and forth, raising the specter of a bloody siege, or the possibility of sallying forth to meet Tywin's forces. But with so few men, it would be suicidal. In the end, Ned ordered ravens to be sent to Riverrun to House Tully, explaining the threat and pleading for alliance. He wrote more letters to the north, urging haste. If Robb marched south with enough men, they might break the Lannister host in the Riverlands. Days turned into a tense vigil. Word came from the countryside that refugees were flooding toward King's Landing, seeking shelter behind its walls. Grain prices skyrocketed. Mobs formed in the streets, shouting curses upon the lion, curses upon the stag, curses upon all lords who let the small folk suffer. Ned rarely slept. He moved from war council to war council, from one exhausting confrontation to another. All the while, he kept watch for a dagger in the dark, or a sudden betrayal from someone he had trusted. Cersei's presence was nearly invisible now. She had locked herself within Maegor's holdfast, ringed by her own Lannister guards. Joffrey was with her, but occasionally he strode out onto the battlements, flanked by Sandor Clegane, sneering down at the city as if he owned it. The boy's arrogance made Ned's stomach churn. One afternoon, as Ned was poring over a map of the Riverlands with Renly and Barristan, the door swung open and Peter Baelish strolled in. He wore a satisfied grin. "Ah, my good lords, I come bearing interesting tidings." Ned raised an eyebrow. "Out with it, Lord Baelish. We've no time for riddles." Littlefinger shrugged in mock offense. "Our dear queen has reached out to me with a proposition. She suggests that if we name Joffrey as king, she will withdraw Lannister forces from the Riverlands and reaffirm all oaths to the crown under his rule. And presumably, Ned, you would remain as hand and olive branch, if you will. A chance to keep the peace." Renly let out a dismissive snort. "He's a bastard born of incest, not the rightful king. You know that as well as we do, Peter." Littlefinger's eyes sparkled mischievously. "Oh, I know. But do the lords of the realm know? Many will side with the Lannisters if it means avoiding war, especially if it keeps the gold flowing. You cannot rely on them to cling to legalities and genealogies. Some might prefer a false king if it means peace and prosperity." Ned's anger flared. You'd have me betray Robert's final will? Betray the laws of the realm? Let a usurper sit on that throne after we have proven his bastardy. Baelish spread his hands in a gesture of innocence. I only relay the offer, my lord. War is a messy business. If you truly desire to keep the realm from drowning in blood, perhaps a compromise is wise. Ned's voice was tight. No compromise that places a bastard on the throne. I cannot break faith with the law. Littlefinger sighed theatrically. Then war it shall be, or so it seems. If Stannis arrives and storms the city, half the lords might flee to the Lannisters for fear of a cold, humorless king. The other half might join with you. It'll be a slaughter one way or another. I would advise. He paused, eyes flicking toward Ned. Never mind. Perhaps my counsel is wasted here. Ned felt an urge to throw the man out of the room. We have no further need of your counsel, Lord Baelish, he said icily. Baelish bowed with mocking courtesy and drifted out. Renly shook his head. One day that man will see the realm burn if he can stand over the ashes. 7 save us from such cunning. War loomed. The days bled into each other. Tension soared. Patrols along the roads leading to the city reported Lannister outriders prowling just out of sight. The Tyrells sat on the fence, waiting to see which way fortune would swing. Dorne was silent, the Vale standoffish. Ned learned from a messenger raven that Robb had called the Northern Banners. They would march soon, but it could take weeks. Winterfell was far. All the while, Ned wondered about Jon. Safe, he hoped, in Winterfell or somewhere near, none the wiser about the illusions swirling in King's Landing. A battered old memory of Lyanna returned to him each night, a glimpse of her face, a faint voice. Promise me, Ned. He had, and he still would. But how to protect Jon from the avalanche of events crushing the 7 kingdoms? At last came a day that changed everything again. Another messenger from the south arrived, announcing that Stannis Baratheon had landed in the Stormlands with a modest army and was marching for King's Landing. Meanwhile, across the city's northern roads, the Outriders announced that Tywin Lannister's host was approaching, presumably to encircle the capital. Soon, 2 armies might converge on King's Landing, one on each side, with the city caught in the middle. The smallfolk began to flee or to cower behind the walls, fearful of an impending siege. The tension was so thick Ned could barely breathe. Renly pulled Ned aside, urging him to consider a plan. He proposed that they take the city in hand, rid themselves of Cersei and Joffrey before either army arrived, and then treat with Stannis from a position of strength. We can't wait for them to starve us out, he argued. We must strike at the Lannisters here in the keep. Seize Joffrey, force her men to stand down. We hold King's Landing, we open the gates to Stannis. Then we hope Tywin will hesitate to assault the city directly. It was a bold plan and dangerous. Ned's instincts rebelled at the idea of shedding blood in the Red Keep, but he saw no alternative. If the city erupted in chaos once 2 armies surrounded it, tens of thousands of innocents might die. So he gathered his loyal guards, and with Renly's men they prepared a swift, sudden strike to arrest Cersei and Joffrey, disarm the Lannisters in the castle, and hopefully restore order before war arrived. In the dark of night, they made their move. Renly, Ned, Ser Barristan, and their men crept through the halls toward Maegor's Holdfast, hearts pounding. They wore mail beneath black cloaks, boots muffled on the stone floors. Stormland knights joined some gold cloaks, though Ned knew he must be cautious. Loyalty was fickle. A single betrayal could doom them. But when they arrived at the drawbridge to Maegor's Holdfast, they found it raised. A line of Lannister guards stood on the other side, crossbows at the ready. Torches lit the night, reflecting off polished steel. Cersei's voice rang out from the shadows, echoing off the walls. Lord Stark, you must think me a fool. Did you really believe I wouldn't know of your pathetic plot? Ned felt a lurch of dread. Someone had betrayed them. Perhaps Littlefinger. Perhaps another. The crossbows were aimed at them, the holdfast sealed. Joffrey's shrill laughter echoed. Ned could see the boy's outline on the walkway above, flanked by Sandor Clegane. Renly cursed under his breath. Ser Barristan drew his sword. There was no immediate path forward. Archers from above might have them in range. Ned realized too late that he had walked into a trap of sorts. Cersei would never risk open confrontation in a hall of the small council, but here, well prepared, she could hold them at bay. Leave now, Cersei cried, or your heads will decorate the walls. I still control half the gold cloaks in the city, if not more. The rest are not so loyal as you imagine. A flicker of movement behind Ned. He turned to see several gold cloaks creeping forward, weapons raised. Their captain, Janos Slint, approached with feigned remorse. "My Lord Hand, you must come with us. You are under arrest for treason against the rightful king, Joffrey Baratheon." Renly's men bristled but were outnumbered 2-1. Ned was forced to sheath his blade. "Treason?" he repeated ironically. "You know the truth, Slint." Slint sneered. "I know who pays my wages. Men have died for less, Lord Stark." Despite the chaos, Ned refused to yield. He glared up at Cersei. "So this is how it ends? You will kill me to keep a bastard on the throne?" Cersei's voice was cruel. "I shall do what I must for my children." Just as Ned expected the order for their arrest, a sudden commotion erupted from behind them. Shouts, the clatter of boots. Ned spun to see a large group pushing through the corridor. At first, he feared it was Lannister reinforcements, but he saw the sigil of the Tyrell rose among them. He recognized Ser Loras Tyrell, helm in hand, leading the group. The Tyrells had thrown their lot in, it seemed, but with whom? Ser Loras raised a gauntlet hand. "In the name of Mace Tyrell, Lord of Highgarden, we demand peace. No blood shall be spilled this night, or we leave the city to the Lannisters alone." Enough. Ned felt relief and uncertainty. Cersei, from across the drawbridge, fell silent, perhaps weighing whether she could win a fight now that the Tyrell knights had arrived. The corridor filled with tension so thick that none dared move. Renly spoke quietly to Ned, so the Tyrells intervened to keep the peace. This might be our chance. Before more words could be exchanged, a gold cloak messenger rushed in from behind Loras, panting. "Lord Stark, Lord Renly, the Lannister army is here." They're camped outside the city walls. A hush fell. War had arrived at King's Landing's doorstep. Outside, by torchlight, one could likely see the banners of the Golden Lion. The city was pinned under siege in all but name. Ned, mind racing, realized that if they fought each other now within these walls, they would be handing Tywin the city on a platter. Cersei must have realized that too. She did not lower the drawbridge, but she raised her voice in forced calm. "Lord Stark, we have a more pressing foe outside. Perhaps we shall decide our differences once we have dealt with my father's approach." A wry twist to her tone. Ned swallowed. "Then we have an uneasy truce." The city was on the brink of war from within, but with Tywin outside, the entire realm might burn. No matter the illusions, no matter the rightful heir, the immediate threat was upon them. And so, the city braced for siege. The Lannisters outside, Stannis approaching from the southeast, and the uncertain alliances within. Above it all loomed the question of who was truly king. Cersei insisted it was Joffrey, Ned upheld that it was Stannis, and the small folk only prayed they might survive another day. In that swirl of tension, Ned remembered Jon, the boy who did not know the storm swirling around him or the legacy hidden in his veins. And Ned remembered Robert's final demand, no Targaryen on the throne. He had promised only to protect the realm and do what was right. Yet he could not guess what shape that right might take in the horrors to come. He knelt in his solar that night, looking at the tattered letter from Robert, turning over in his hands the heavy burden of secrets. The realm was fracturing, armies converging, blood about to flow like a river in spring thaw. The last Targaryen in Westeros was a boy in the north who might, one day, rise to claim a destiny that Ned's every choice sought to deny or protect. Would that fate bring peace, or a deeper war? Ned stared into the darkness, praying to the old gods for a way forward, the memory of Lyanna haunting him still. He had revealed Jon's parentage to Robert in time to stave off the boy's murder, but in so doing, he had set events in motion that no mortal man could now control. The cost had been Robert's rage, the unraveling of the throne's succession, and a looming civil war. For a moment, Ned allowed himself the vain hope that perhaps, by some miracle, the realm would not be drowned in blood. But as horns sounded from the city walls that night, signaling movement in the Lannister camps, he feared the worst. So the realm waited, and Jon's secret lay in the distant north, safe for the moment from the tragedy unfolding in King's Landing. But secrets rarely stay hidden forever, especially when the tide of war rises. Soon enough, all men would have to choose their banners, place their loyalties, and face the truth or be broken by it. And in the quiet hours, Ned Stark knew that the cost of his revelations had only begun to be paid. He remembered the boar that had gored Robert, the wine that had dulled his friend's senses, and the heartbreak in the king's eyes as he realized everything he had believed for years was a lie. Another great war was upon them, and the final turn of fate might rest on the boy in the north who carried the blood of ice and fire. With a long, slow breath, Ned snuffed the candle and sank into a troubled sleep, the city around him bracing for the dawn of chaos. In that darkness, he dreamed again of the Tower of Joy, of Lyanna's voice whispering, "Promise me." He had kept the promise at last, revealing the truth in the hopes of saving Jon. Yet the path it had set them upon was uncertain, forging a new chapter in the story of Westeros. If only the gods would be kind. But the gods often are not, and the wars of kings seldom spare the innocent. Ned Stark could do no more than stand his ground, fight for what was just, and hope that somehow the secrets he had carried for so long would not drown the realm in dragonfire and blood. Ned Stark stood gazing out from a high window in the Tower of the Hand, the distant roar of tumult echoing through King's Landing. He listened for the horns that blared intermittently along the walls, an urgent reminder that Lord Tywin Lannister's host now ringed the city in a near-complete encirclement. Even more ominously, word had reached him that Stannis Baratheon was marching from the Stormlands, though no one could be certain of his precise numbers or how quickly he might arrive. Rain had fallen in the night, leaving the stone streets slick, the city's gutters choked with filth. A cold wind swept off the Blackwater Rush, carrying the stench of too many people huddled behind walls that might soon be under siege. In the hall outside, he heard the scrape of boot leather. 2 gold cloaks hovered in anxious vigilance, men who might or might not be loyal, given how thinly their allegiance was stretched. Tension crackled through the Red Keep like lightning in a storm. Cersei and her son, King Joffrey, so-called, remained entrenched in Maegor's Holdfast, ringed by their Lannister guards. Renly Baratheon and Ser Barristan and Selmy had accompanied Ned earlier in a doomed attempt to seize the Queen and her children, only to discover that Littlefinger's whispers had reached Cersei first. The Holdfast's drawbridge had been raised, crossbows bristling. A confrontation had nearly erupted into open bloodshed. Then Tywin's arrival had changed the stakes yet again. Ned's mind churned. The King Robert Baratheon was dead, leaving a chasm of power that was threatening to swallow the realm whole. The illusions around Joffrey's parentage were now exposed to any with eyes to see. He was Jaime Lannister's son, born of incest, not Robert's true heir. By law, by every custom recognized in Westeros, the crown should pass to Stannis Baratheon. Yet most of the city knew nothing of these intricacies. Rumors abounded but had not yet crystallized into a single, undeniable truth in the minds of the smallfolk. Meanwhile, Cersei insisted on proclaiming Joffrey as king, refusing any talk of Stannis, and Tywin Lannister had marched to ensure House Lannister's will would be enforced. Sleep had become a stranger to Ned in recent days. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw the Tower of Joy again, that swirling tapestry of grief and blood where Lyanna had pressed her last request upon him. He heard her voice, faint as a breath, promise me. He had, and so he had kept the child, Jon Snow, hidden in Winterfell, disguising the boy as his own bastard. Now, in a moment of moral compulsion, Ned had revealed Jon's heritage to Robert, only to witness Robert's shock, rage, and final demand that no Targaryen should ever rule after him. Then the boar had ended Robert's life, and all Westeros teetered on a blade's edge. He turned from the window at last and walked to the table where a scattered mess of letters, maps, and scribbled dispatches awaited. Ravens flew in and out of the rookery at a disquieting pace, bearing news that was seldom good. Catelyn had written from Winterfell, Robb had mustered the northern banners, and they were marching south with as many men as they could gather, though that was no trivial journey. The Umbers, the Glovers, the Boltons, the Manderleys all would need time to rally. And they would not come quietly, not if the Lannisters opposed them. As for the Vale, Lisa Arryn still refused to commit her knights to any cause, citing the need to protect her son. It was a decision that stung Ned's pride, remembering how Jon Arryn had once nurtured him in the Eyrie. Now, in the hour of greatest need, the Vale stood aloof. A knock came on the door. One of Ned's trusted guardsmen, Jory Castle, leaned in. "My lord, Lord Renly requests a word in the audience chamber." Ned nodded, smoothing a hand over his beard. Weariness clung to him, but he had no time to show it. "Very well, Jory. Wait a moment." He glanced over the scrolls, wondering if more dire tidings had arrived, but decided it made no difference. "Let us go." They exited the Tower of the Hand and made their way through the dim corridors. Fires guttered in sconces on the walls, their light revealing the nervous, pinched faces of servants hurrying by. Twice, Ned passed clusters of armed men who were not Lannisters, Tyrell men from Highgarden, or Stormlanders who had arrived with Renly. The Red Keep had become a patchwork of alliances in these tense days. The King's Guard, the Gold Cloaks, the Queen's private retinue, lords from various houses who were unsure where to pledge their swords, and Ned's own Northmen from his small retinue, felt like walking on cracked ice, a single misstep away from calamity. In the audience chamber, Ned found Renly pacing in front of a low table piled with fruit and cheese. Ser Barristan Selmy stood near the wall, arms crossed, still every inch the honorable Kingsguard knight. Behind them, Lord Baelish lounged in a tall chair, idly spinning a dagger by its hilt on the tabletop. Varys stood in a corner, hands tucked into the voluminous sleeves of his lavender robes, expression grave. The tension in the room was evident at once. Renly paused upon seeing Ned, and he gestured curtly for the door to be closed. "This cannot continue," Renly said without preamble. "Tywin Lannister's men are entrenched outside the walls. Our scouts say he has at least 20,000 foot, 3,000 horse. His outriders scour the roads from Rosby to the Gold Road, intercepting supply carts. The city's granaries cannot feed us for more than a few weeks if siege is truly laid." Barristan Selmy frowned. "It may be that Lord Tywin hopes to starve us out or force us to submit to Joffrey's claim. Word is that he's already sent an envoy, demanding we open the gates in the name of King Joffrey." Ned's jaw tightened. "We dare not yield. Robert named me protector of the realm, and I cannot, in good conscience, surrender the throne to a bastard. Stannis is the rightful heir. I will not betray my friend's last command by letting the Lannisters seat Joffrey unchallenged." Littlefinger, still spinning his dagger, gave a theatrical sigh. "But of course, ever the stalwart champion of the law, aren't you, Lord Stark?" He let the dagger point scrape the tabletop in a tiny circle. "I suppose the real question is, how do we survive long enough for Stannis to arrive, or for Ned's son and the northern banners to come?" Varys cleared his throat softly. "There is also the question of the small folk, my lords. Already I hear whispers of unrest. The price of bread has tripled in the last fortnight. If the city is properly besieged, the poor will starve by the thousands. Then we shall have riots, chaos, blood in the streets." Renly's mouth set in a grim line. "We must consider sallying out to meet Tywin before he can choke us entirely." Ned shook his head. "We lack the numbers. If we march out of the gates, Tywin's forces will encircle us in open ground. We'd be slaughtered. Our best chance, I believe, is to hold the walls until reinforcements arrive. Stannis from the Stormlands, Robb from the north. If we can endure that long, Tywin may be forced to split his forces. We might stand a chance." Ser Barristan offered a nod. "He is not wrong, Lord Renly. Even a large army can break itself against stout walls, especially if we have the gold cloaks manning the battlements. But the people will suffer. There is no avoiding that." Renly snatched a grape from the table and rolled it between his fingers. The people have already begun cursing us all. Some call for Prince Joffrey, some for King Stannis. Most just want the price of bread to go down. If we cannot feed them, who knows whether they will open the gates to Tywin themselves." A thoughtful silence. Finally, Ned drew a slow breath. "We do have storehouses by the Gate of the Gods. Lord Varys, perhaps you can ensure that distribution of grain to the poorest districts is made a priority. If we maintain some measure of goodwill, the small folk might remain on our side." Varys inclined his head. "I will do what I can, though I fear that in times like these, small mercies rarely suffice." Littlefinger flicked the dagger upright, caught it by the hilt, and smiled. "And what of her grace, the queen? She remains closed up in Maegor's holdfast with her lovely boy. Perhaps they are enjoying lemon cakes while we scrounge for solutions." Renly shot him a warning look. "Cersei is not to be trifled with. She has a cunning mind, and half the gold cloaks might still side with her if it comes to a quick scramble. We must be decisive if we mean to stand by Stannis' claim." Ned ground his teeth at the thought of that half-finished plan to arrest Cersei, which had been foiled by her foreknowledge. "If we try again," he said, "we'll meet a hail of crossbow bolts and a locked portcullis. The holdfast is too well defended. We'd spark bloodshed throughout the Red Keep, just as Tywin's men close in." The conversation circled for what felt like an hour, meandering between half-measures and desperate gambits. In the end, no true consensus was reached on how to oust Cersei before Stannis arrived, or whether that was even wise at this juncture. It felt as though they were men standing on a raft, drifting toward rapids, yet arguing how to steer with a single broken oar. At last, Renly called for the meeting to end. "We must see to the city's defenses," he told Ned. "Ser Barristan, you and I will speak with the captains about scheduling more frequent night patrols. Lord Varys, distribute what food you can. And you, Lord Baelish, His voice held a hint of contempt. "Try not to sell the city out from under us." Littlefinger's grin widened. "I shall do my best, my lord. But mind you, gold is a powerful persuader, especially when the outcome looks bleak." They dispersed. Ned left with Jory weaving through the labyrinthine corridors. He felt an oppressive weight on his heart, the sense that each day King's Landing teetered closer to a storm of steel and fire. He could not help wondering if he had erred in revealing the truth of Joffrey's parentage as quickly as he had done. But no, it was the only honest course. Perhaps, he told himself, if Robert had lived and supported Ned openly, the realm might have accepted the truth. Now everything was uncertain. In the halls, men and women scurried past with drawn faces, while outside, the horns and shouts of watchmen attested to Tywin Lannister's looming presence. He paused before Sansa's chambers. 2 of his own household guards stood watch there, men who had come from Winterfell. Ned's chest tightened as he remembered that Sansa had once been so enthralled by the idea of marrying Joffrey, so entranced by the notion of a fair-haired prince. That dream was now so thoroughly shattered. He had not told her the full truth, that Joffrey was Jaime's child rather than Robert's, but rumor was thick in the Red Keep. Sansa had grown pale and skittish in recent days, as though her illusions had been pulled from beneath her feet. He stepped inside. The solar was bright, courtesy of wide windows that let in the midday sun. Sansa stood near the hearth wearing a pale blue gown embroidered with little white flowers. Her eyes were red from tears. Arya sat on a bench by the wall, one knee drawn up, watching her sister with a mixture of sympathy and annoyance. Sansa looked up. "Father," she said in a trembling voice. Arya rose. "You're back. We heard about the soldiers outside. Is there going to be a battle?" Ned set his hand gently on Arya's head, then looked at Sansa. "We must be ready for anything," he said. "But I will do what I can to protect the city and you both." Sansa's lips quivered. They say Lord Tywin is here to put the Queen's son on the throne," she blurted. "That Joffrey is already calling himself King Joffrey." Arya's expression hardened. "He isn't the king," she spat. "Everybody knows it now. He's not father's friend's son at all. He's a lion, not a stag." Sansa looked away, tears forming again. Ned felt a pang in his chest. She had pinned so many childish hopes on a golden-haired prince who would sweep her away to a life of songs. Now reality had come down like an iron portcullis. He came forward and placed a steady hand on Sansa's shoulder. "My sweet girl," he said softly. "I know how harsh this all seems, but we cannot change the truth or the times we live in. Sometimes we must simply endure." She wiped her eyes. "What will happen to us? If the city falls, will we be taken prisoner? Mother is not here. Robb is so far away. I'm afraid." Ned squeezed her shoulder. "I will keep you safe," he said firmly. "No matter what befalls the city, I will see you both leave this place alive. We are Starks of the North. We do not break." Sansa gave a shaky nod, while Arya stiffened as though the mention of their name reminded her to be strong. Ned drew them both into a brief embrace, wishing he could conjure the comforting halls of Winterfell with a mere word. Yet the cold stone of King's Landing would not yield such warmth. When he left them, he felt his determination steeled. If war was inevitable, he would see it through. He was no commander of thousands, but he would hold to Robert's testament and keep the city in trust until Stannis arrived. Then the realm could decide whether it would accept the rightful heir or if the Lannisters and their allies would fling the Seven Kingdoms into a civil war that might eclipse even Robert's rebellion. Outside in the corridor, Ned conferred briefly with Jory about the mustering of the gold cloaks loyal to the crown, or at least loyal to Ned's coin. Jory reported that half of the city watch seemed ready to side with the hand, while the other half was more uncertain, some drawn by Lannister gold. It was an uneasy balance, and any spark could tip it. By late afternoon, horns sounded again, and the city braced for an attack. From the ramparts of the Red Keep, Ned watched columns of Lannister men maneuvering just out of arrow range. The sun glinted off polished steel and flickering banners, the golden lion on crimson cloth snapping in the breeze. A line of siege towers and catapults was being assembled. For a moment, Ned's heart thundered. Were they about to attempt a direct assault? Yet no charge came. The Lannisters halted and began setting up an encampment as if to display their strength and unnerve the defenders. By dusk, the watchers on the walls reported that the Lannister lines had extended to block the main roads in every direction, effectively cutting King's Landing off. The shipping lanes on the Blackwater Bay remained open for now, but there were rumors of Lannister galleys in the offing, aided by the red wines of the Arbor or others partial to House Lannister. Soon, even the sea might be a battleground. Ned realized that if they were not properly resupplied, the city would buckle. He conferred with Renly and Littlefinger about sending envoys to secure more grain shipments by sea. Littlefinger, with a perfumed sigh, promised to do what he could. Renly paced and cursed, muttering that if only Mace Tyrell would commit all the forces of the Reach, they might break the Lannisters. But Highgarden had apparently chosen a subtler game, sending a small retinue to observe but not wholeheartedly committing. Ned suspected the Tyrells would weigh the tide of events before choosing which side would most benefit them. Within the Red Keep, the nights were tense and uneasy. The watch was doubled, patrols roamed the corridors to prevent any infiltration by Lannister moles. Smoke drifted from torch sconces, wreathing the halls in a haze that stung the eyes. The knowledge that Cersei Lannister and Joffrey lurked behind guarded gates within the same castle only deepened Ned's sense that conflict might erupt at any moment. He tried to find fleeting moments of rest, but sleep seldom lasted long. 3 nights after Tywin's forces encircled the city, Ned was roused from a doze by Jory's urgent summons. A messenger from the gatehouses claimed to bring dire tidings. Ned pulled on his cloak and followed Jory through torchlit passages until they reached a courtyard near the King's Gate. There, a young man dressed in travel-stained leathers knelt, breathing hard. "Speak," Ned urged. "What news?" The messenger lifted his sweaty face. "Ships, my lord. A fleet under the banner of Dragonstone has been sighted sailing up the Blackwater. Word spreads that Lord Stannis Baratheon is on those ships." Ned's heart jolted. "Stannis? How many men does he bring?" The messenger swallowed. "It said he has 30 war galleys, perhaps more, and transports bearing several thousand infantry. They've made landfall south of the city, and some say they will cross the river to flank Lord Tywin's lines. Others fear they might simply blockade the Blackwater to starve the city. None can say for certain, but it is sure that Stannis is near." Ned dismissed the messenger, who was led away for food and rest. Jory turned to Ned, eyes alight with hope and worry. "If Stannis engages Tywin, it might relieve the siege, or it might trap us between 2 armies." Ned frowned. "Stannis is the rightful heir, but he's never been famed for mercy or compromise. He might prefer to let Tywin and the city watch each other starve, so he can pick off whoever remains. Or he might be swift and direct, as is his nature. We must be prepared." Word spread through King's Landing like wildfire. Stannis Baratheon was here, with a fleet on the Blackwater, seeking to claim his crown. The small folk trembled at the notion of more war, while lords scrambled to guess which side might prevail. In the Red Keep, Renly wore a wary smile, well aware of his brother's iron-willed temperament. Cersei must have fumed behind her walls in Maegor's Holdfast, for her father Tywin was now faced with the prospect of a 2-pronged engagement. The next morning, Ned ascended the castle walls that overlooked the city's southern approach. From that vantage, he could see the shimmering waters of the Blackwater rush. Indeed, the dark shapes of numerous ships bobbed on the current. On the opposite bank, to the southeast, were scattered banners. The crowned stag of Baratheon upon a field of fiery heart, for many of Stannis's men had begun to bear the red heart of the Lord of Light, though the rumors of that foreign faith were as yet unconfirmed in the city. A wave of curiosity and dread rippled through Ned. He had never known Stannis well. Robert's elder younger brother was solemn, grave, and unyielding, a man who adhered to the letter of the law. And now that law placed a crown on his head. Standing near Ned on the battlements was Ser Barristan. The old knight's face was set with concern. "Lord Stannis will not wish to parley with a city he sees as half-taken by traitors," he said quietly. "He will expect them to yield or be destroyed. Let us pray he sees you as no traitor, my lord. You speak for Robert, after all." "I will do my best to treat with him," Ned replied. "He must know I stand by his claim, even if Cersei and her brood do not." A rider came galloping along the bank on the city's side of the river, bearing a Baratheon banner. The watchers on the walls tensed, uncertain whether to shoot. Ned commanded them to hold, and soon the rider came within hailing distance of the gates, shouting for entry. Ned dispatched Jory with a troop of gold cloaks to escort the messenger within. By midday, Ned was in the presence of a knight who introduced himself as Ser Justin Massey, an envoy of Lord Stannis Baratheon. In the Tower of the Hand Solar, Ser Justin bowed stiffly. "My Lord Hand," he said, "I come in the name of Stannis of House Baratheon, by rights King of the Undulls and the First Men. My lord and king knows that you have proclaimed him rightful heir. He invites you to remove the false queen and her children from Maegor's holdfast, surrender them, and open the gates of the city in King Stannis' name. Ned exchanged a look with Renly, who stood by the fireplace. That might not be so easily done, Ned said, turning back to Ser Justin. The Lannisters hold the city in siege from without, and Queen Cersei remains protected by her loyal guards within. We do not command enough men to subdue her without risking a massacre inside these walls. My lord, King Stannis is prepared to engage Lord Tywin's host, Ser Justin replied. He believes that once he routs the Lannisters, the city will have no reason to fear. You need only rise in open declaration of your loyalty, show that you stand with the rightful king, and yield any Lannisters who remain in your power. Renly let out a slight laugh. My brother is as direct as ever. Does he propose we fling ourselves against the Red Keep's gates from the inside? We tried to arrest Cersei once. She was forewarned and barricaded herself. She will not yield easily. Ser Justin's voice took on a note of urgency. King Stannis is aware of these difficulties. But the realm cannot tolerate a bastard's claim. He will come in force by land and river both. He bids Lord Eddard Stark to keep the peace in the city as best he can until the Lannister host is shattered. Then, together, we shall remove the false queen and see Joffrey dethroned. The king says you need only hold the city for a fortnight, perhaps less. Ned felt both hope and trepidation stirring inside him. If Stannis truly can defeat Tywin in the field, that will break the siege. I can attempt to maintain order within the walls. He thought of the food stores, the discontent of the small folk, the precarious loyalties of the gold cloaks. But if the Lannisters assault first, or if they burn the fields, we may face famine and chaos. Renly drummed his fingers on the mantle. Stannis is never one for half measures. He'll do as he says. The question is whether Tywin will stand and fight or retreat westward to lure Stannis into a prolonged campaign, or whether he'll simply tighten his stranglehold on the city, hoping we tear ourselves apart. Ned turned back to Ser Justin. Convey this to your king. I hold King's Landing in trust for him, as Robert's designated protector of the realm, but we lack the strength to remove Cersei by open force without risking a slaughter. I will do all I can to prevent her from seizing control, and I will declare for Stannis publicly if he can break Tywin's siege. Tell him also that we must ensure the safety of the small folk if at all possible. Ser Justin nodded. I will bring your words to him, my lord. King Stannis hopes that you will remain firm, for the good of the realm. After the envoy's departure, Renly lingered in the solar, absently rubbing his chin. This is our best chance. If Stannis can crush Tywin, we can open the gates to him, and Cersei will have nowhere to hide. Ned sighed. Yes, but in war so much can go awry. I must prepare for every possibility, including the chance that Tywin might defeat Stannis. Hardly likely, Renly scoffed, but there was an edge of worry in his eyes. Though Stannis does not have overwhelming numbers, his discipline is unmatched. And I doubt Tywin can easily crush a Baratheon army in open battle, not without the full might of the Reach or the Crownlands behind him. Ned remembered the cunning that Tywin Lannister had displayed in the previous rebellion, how swift and brutal his tactics could be. We shall see, Ned said. The Seven guide us. In the days that followed, the city's walls bristled with archers and watchers, scanning the horizon for the first clash between Tywin and Stannis. Scouts reported that Stannis' forces were moving northward, skirting the Rosby Road to avoid Tywin's main lines, apparently seeking higher ground. Tywin in turn sent out raiding parties to harass them. Skirmishes flared in the distance, smoke rising from torch-burned villages that had the misfortune of lying in the army's path. All the while, King's Landing remained locked in fear. Mobs grew outside the Street of Flour, where bread was too expensive for most to buy. The gold cloaks patrolled in tense formation, sometimes beating the more unruly protesters into submission. Ned took no pleasure in that, but the alternative was riot. One evening, Ned stood with Ser Barristan on the Red Keep's walls, looking upon the flickering lights of the city below. The sun was sinking in a blaze of orange and pink, staining the sky like spilled wine. The air smelled of wood smoke and sweat and fear. In the quiet, Ned asked, Ser Barristan, do you truly believe we do right by Robert in supporting Stannis? Robert never loved him, always found him too rigid. But the law is the law. The old knight looked pained. I once served the Mad King, Aerys Targaryen, and I saw what befell the realm when the law was twisted or ignored. Robert's rebellion was just in my eyes, for Aerys was a monster who burned his own subjects alive. Now we face a different question. A queen's bastard who claims a throne cannot condone it. Even if the realm or half of it would prefer a pliable boy to Stannis, well, one cannot simply choose a false king. Our honor demands otherwise. Ned nodded. Yes, honor. That is what compels me, too. He glanced westward, where the faint glow of campfires told of Tywin's lines. Though I fear for the cost this war will levy on the small folk. Sometimes I wonder if a false peace might spare them more suffering. Barristan's voice was quiet. Any peace built on lies is no true peace. Perhaps if Cersei had yielded gracefully upon Robert's death, we might have found a way to avoid bloodshed. But that path is closed. We must see it through. They stood in silence until the sky turned a deeper purple, each lost in thought. The next dawn brought the echoes of distant combat. On the walls, watchers reported that Stannis' host had clashed with a large Lannister force east of the Rosby Road. Drums and horns carried faintly on the wind, a grim music. All day, rumors flew through the city. Stannis had been defeated. Stannis had outflanked Tywin. Tywin had burned half of Stannis' siege engines. No one knew the truth. The waiting was excruciating, a slow gnaw of dread. Late that afternoon, a rider approached the King's Gate under a flag of truce. Ned went down to meet the man in the courtyard, accompanied by Renly and a wedge of gold cloaks. The rider wore the lion sigil of House Lannister. His horse's flank was spattered with drying blood. "My Lord Hand," the rider said, struggling to bow from the saddle. "I come from Lord Tywin with word of this day's battle. Will you hear it?" Ned's jaw tightened. "Speak." The rider lifted his voice so that all nearby could hear. Lord Tywin Lannister met Lord Stannis Baratheon in open field near a place called Stokeworth. After fierce fighting, both sides have drawn back. Casualties are heavy on both parts. Lord Tywin offers a parley. He will meet with you, my lord, beneath the walls at dawn to discuss terms of peace. Renly barked a sardonic laugh. Peace? Terms? Tywin must think we're cornered animals. Ned raised a hand to calm Renly, studying the messenger's face. How fares Lord Stannis? Was he taken or slain? Neither, my lord. Stannis withdrew in good order. His host remains intact, though they too suffered losses. The outcome was inconclusive. Lord Tywin says that unless you and he can come to an understanding, he will starve the city until Stannis is forced to retreat or until the city is too weak to resist. He demands the immediate recognition of King Joffrey's rights. A hush settled over the courtyard. The gold cloaks shifted uneasily, glancing at Ned. Renly spat on the ground. So that is his price for peace, acknowledging a bastard who has no rightful claim. We should hang this messenger and let Tywin know his arrogance is wasted. Ned shot Renly a reprimanding look. We do not murder envoys. The laws of gods and men forbid it. Then, to the rider, tell your lord I will meet him at dawn beneath the walls, but I will bring my own retinue and I will not be parted from them. If this is a trap, the blood spilled will be on his head. The rider inclined his head. I will deliver the message. He will await you by the old sept outside the gate of the gods. At dawn, my lord. Then he spurred his horse and thundered out under the raised portcullis. Renly rounded on Ned. You can't be seriously considering parley. Tywin Lannister is the last man to keep faith with any vow. Ned exhaled. Better to speak and see what he offers than to ignore him and risk the city's starvation. If there's any chance to end the siege without butchery in the streets, I must attempt it. That does not mean I will yield to him. Renly looked unconvinced but did not argue further. At dawn, Ned donned his armor for the first time since arriving at King's Landing. His old plate was plain and serviceable, lacking any flourish or gilding. He wore a battered cloak pinned with the dire wolf of House Stark. Renly joined him, shining in green and gold half-plate, the stag emblem hammered onto his breast. Ser Barristan accompanied them, as did a handful of loyal knights from the Stormlands and the north, perhaps 20 in total. They rode out from the Gate of the Gods under a crisp morning sky. A thin mist clung to the grassy fields beyond the walls where the battered shell of an old sept stood abandoned. Once it had served the small folk outside the city, now it lay partially collapsed from years of neglect. As they approached, Ned saw a large knot of mounted Lannister knights on the far side of the ruined sept, their crimson cloaks bright in the pale light. The golden lion on their banners glimmered. In their midst loomed Lord Tywin Lannister himself, astride a tall warhorse with eyes as cold as its master's. Even at a distance, Ned recognized the figure, tall, broad-shouldered for an older man, clad in ornate plate chased with gold, a crimson cloak flowing behind him. His face was stern, with sharp cheekbones and the shaved head that made his features even more severe. "Have a care," Renly murmured as they drew closer. "If I know Tywin, he'll have archers hidden in the trees." Ned had no doubt. Yet the courtesy of parley demanded that neither side launch an attack here, under truce. As they reined in their horses before the sept, Tywin regarded them with cool disdain. His retinue parted to reveal him in all his pride, his green eyes fixated on Ned. "Lord Stark," Tywin said in a clipped voice. "It has been some time." Ned recalled the end of the rebellion when Tywin had sacked King's Landing in the name of the new King Robert, presenting the bodies of the Targaryen children to earn Robert's gratitude. The memory made Ned's stomach churn. "Lord Tywin," he said, dismounting. Renly and the others followed suit. Ned approached within a few paces, measuring the distance carefully so that neither side could strike easily. "You wish to discuss terms?" Tywin inclined his head. "I do. My men tell me Lord Stannis has grown bolder in the field, that he thirsts for a decisive engagement. That would end poorly for all involved, no doubt. War is costly, and if we keep it, the city will starve, the countryside will burn. Surely we can avoid such waste." Renly let out a soft snort. "You propose that we open the gates to your bastard king, I imagine. That's your notion of avoiding waste." Tywin's pale green eyes flicked to Renly with the faintest hint of contempt. "I propose that Eddard Stark set aside his nonsense about Stannis' claim and remember his loyalty to King Robert. Robert's son sits the throne now by all the laws of succession." Ned's anger stirred. "We both know Robert's children by Cersei are not his," he said curtly. "Should we lie to the realm to satisfy your ambitions?" A faint tightening around Tywin's eyes betrayed a flash of annoyance. "A vile rumor started by Jon Arryn, who died for prying where he did not belong. You would do well to learn from that example, Stark." Renly's hand went to the hilt of his sword. "Are you threatening us, my lord?" Tywin gave an icy smile. "I do not threaten. I present inevitabilities. Even if this rumor were true, which it is not, what of it? The realm does not need another war to settle trifling genealogies. The boy has a Baratheon name, and that is enough for lords who prefer stability over chaos. Robert is gone, and all that remains is to ensure an orderly transfer of power." Ned realized then that Tywin had no intention of acknowledging any truth but his own. "Your suggestion is that we bend the knee to Joffrey. I, who was named protector by Robert himself, must yield up the city so that you may seat a false heir on the throne. And in return," Tywin said smoothly, "King Joffrey would grant you a royal pardon for any misunderstandings. You may even keep your position as hand if the queen is feeling lenient. The North will remain yours to rule without fear of Lannister aggression. It is a generous offer." His gaze bored into Ned's. "Refuse, and you face the certain ruin of King's Landing, the slaughter of thousands, the famine of tens of thousands, and the eventual demise of your cause when no allies remain to support this so-called rightful heir of yours." Ned's face tightened. "Stannis will not fall easily. Nor shall the North stand idle if you continue to threaten us. My son Robb marches south with the might of Winterfell behind him." A small murmur went through the Lannister knights. Tywin looked unperturbed. "Then we shall show the boy what war truly is. My vantage is simple. The realm sees Joffrey as the crowned king, whether they love him or not. If you continue this rebellion, you place yourselves beyond the pale of the law." He shifted in the saddle, scanning their faces. "Last chance, Stark. Bend the knee now, open the gates, surrender the queen's enemies, and be rewarded. Or cling to your illusions and watch your city burn around you." Renly's cheeks were flushed with anger. "You dare to call us traitors? Joffrey is Jaime Lannister's spawn. Robert's entire line is false with that boy. You place a product of incest on the throne, disgracing the realm." Tywin's cold expression did not waver. "I place a Baratheon on the throne, recognized by the laws of inheritance, anointed by the faith, or I should say, by the new High Septon. Call it incest if you like, but if that rumor spreads, so too will the rumor that your brother Stannis dabbles in foreign gods and black arts. That he seeks to burn the Seven. The realm will recoil from him." He paused. "We have gold and cunning enough to make the people believe what we please. So I ask you again, which path will it be?" Ned inhaled, feeling the dryness in his throat. He knew that Tywin was deadly serious. If Ned refused, the man would starve the city, or assault it, or do whatever was necessary to see Joffrey enthroned. He was not a man to bluff. But Ned could not yield. Stannis was the rightful heir. His vow to Robert, his sense of honor, and every shred of truth demanded that he stand firm. He clenched his jaw. "I will not bend the knee to a lie. Tell your bastard king that we will resist him until Stannis arrives to claim what is lawfully his." Tywin's face betrayed neither disappointment nor surprise, only a certain grim finality. "Very well," he said. "Then know that when the city starves, the blame will lie with you, Lord Stark. When the peasants riot and tear each other to pieces for crusts of bread, remember this day. When your precious daughters are left at the mercy of men who have lost all mercy, remember that I offered you peace." Ned stiffened, a roil of fear rising for Sansa and Arya. He spoke in an even tone. "I have heard your threats. Now be gone from our gates, or must we break this truce?" A small, cruel smile ghosted across Tywin's face. He gave a curt nod to his retinue, then turned his horse away. Crimson-cloaked knights wheeled in formation, spurring their mounts. Within moments, they rode off in a cloud of dust, leaving Ned and Renly standing among their men outside the ruin of the Sept. As the hush settled, Renly muttered, "That went about as well as I expected." Ned nodded. "We are committed. There can be no turning back now." He gestured to their men. "Let us return inside. We'll double-check the walls, prepare for the worst, and pray that Stannis comes swiftly." They rode back to the city in a somber column, the morning sun climbing higher over the ramparts. Ned felt the weight of Tywin's warning pressing on him. The man was ruthless. Already, the supply lines to the city were cut. In a siege, the well-heeled could survive, but the poor would suffer terribly. Ned dreaded the moment when bread would run out or disease would spread among cramped, hungry masses. Then all would blame him, or else they would fling open the gates to Tywin. Fear was a mighty weapon, and Tywin Lannister knew how to use it. Within King's Landing, the next few days brought a descent into deeper misery. The first sign came when crowds of ragged men and women gathered outside the Red Keep, clamoring for food. The gold cloaks forced them back. The distribution of grain from the storehouses continued, but it was never enough. Prices soared in the markets. Day by day, the city slid closer to the precipice. On the 5th day after Ned's parley with Tywin, the riots began. It started in Flea Bottom, where a rumor spread that the Crown's men hoarded bread in secret. A restless mob formed, surging through the cramped alleys, overturning stalls and wagons, attacking anyone who looked like a government official or a noble. The City Watch responded with cudgels, but the disorder spilled onto the Street of Steel, then the Street of Flour. By midday, a full-scale riot had erupted near the Fishmongers' Square, with thousands of desperate small folk screaming about hunger and injustice. Some shouted curses upon the name Stark or Baratheon or Lannister, whichever noble house they blamed for their empty bellies. Ned had only a handful of watchers loyal to him in that quarter. Word reached him that a bakery was looted, a Gold Cloaks officer beaten to death, and that groups of roving thugs had begun raiding shops. Barristan Selmy and a detachment of the City Watch rode out to quell the violence, but it was like stamping on a fire that burned in a dozen spots at once. A child was trampled. A well-to-do merchant was dragged from his cart and murdered. When Ned heard the chaotic reports, his stomach twisted with horror and frustration. Tywin's words rang in his mind, "When the peasants riot and tear each other to pieces, remember that I offered you peace." He and Renly stood in the yard of the Red Keep, listening to the tumult that roiled beyond the walls. Ser Barristan rode in, helmet dented, dust caking his white cloak. "My lord," he said, leaning heavily in the saddle, "the watch is dispersing them, but it's bedlam out there. So many are starving, and they cry for bread. We can try to feed them, but there is not enough." Ned's heart sank. "Do what you can. We must keep them from storming the gates." Renly gave Ned a look of deep worry. "We cannot hold the city by force alone if the people turn on us. This is exactly what Tywin wants." Ser Barristan nodded grimly. "What's worse, some cry that the Queen is inside the Red Keep feasting while they starve. They do not understand that we are at odds with Cersei. To them, we are all lords. Our distinctions matter little to the hungry." Before Ned could reply, a horn blast from the ramparts signaled new arrivals at the Gate of the Gods. Had Tywin launched an assault? Or was this more of Stannis' men? Ned hurried to the gate with Renly and Barristan, accompanied by a small guard. Atop the walls, they peered down to see a column of riders approaching behind a great gray banner. Ned's breath caught. The direwolf of House Stark snapped in the wind. At their head rode a young man wearing a lord's mantle, Robb Stark, surrounded by the knights and bannermen of the north. Ned felt a mingling of relief and alarm. His son had arrived, but how many men did he bring? And had he somehow bypassed Tywin's lines or fought his way through them? The gates opened under Ned's command and the Northmen entered. Dusty, some of them bloodied, but exuding the fierce determination of men on a mission. Ned hurried down to greet them in the main courtyard. There, at last, he beheld Robb. The boy was taller than when Ned had left him at Winterfell, a hint of manhood in his face, though his cheeks still betrayed a certain youthful softness. He wore a breastplate bearing the dire wolf, his sword at his side. Grey Wind, the great dire wolf, padded at his horse's flank, tongue lolling. Robb dismounted. "Father," he said, voice thick with emotion. He knelt, though Ned hastily pulled him up into an embrace. "Gods be good, Robb. You've come a long way. Are you hurt?" Ned scanned him for injuries, noticing a bruise on his temple. Robb shook his head. "A skirmish at the Trident Crossing. The Lannisters tried to bar our way, but we outmaneuvered them. We lost men, though." He paused, eyes flicking around at the city. "I brought as many as I could muster, maybe 15,000. We marched hard, but I see the city stands under siege. Tywin is out there. Have you been able to?" Ned laid a hand on his son's shoulder. "There is much to tell and little good news. We are short on provisions, the small folk are rioting, and Stannis is engaged with Tywin in skirmishes to the east. Now that you are here, perhaps we stand a better chance. But the danger is great." Robb's gaze hardened. "We will not abandon you. The North has come for its lord, and we will see this through. Where do we stand? Are we truly supporting Lord Stannis?" "We are," Ned confirmed, "for he is the rightful heir. Joffrey is not Robert's son, but a Lannister bastard. Now that you are here, we must coordinate with Stannis to break Tywin's siege." They led the northern host deeper into the city, finding space for them in cramped squares and along the streets near the Mudgate. The presence of new troops brought momentary hope to some of the city watch, but the small folk only saw more armed men needing food, further draining precious supplies. Ned could sense the tension rising. He had to act quickly before the city's hunger and fear consumed them all. That very evening, Ned convened a war council in the Grand Hall of the Red Keep. The dais that once held the Iron Throne loomed in the background, but no one sat upon it now. Joffrey and Cersei remained locked away in Maegor's holdfast. Around a large table, Ned gathered Renly, Robb, Ser Barristan, and representatives from the North and the Stormlands. They studied maps by torchlight, speaking in hushed tones as shadows danced on the walls. Robb explained how he had crossed the neck with the bulk of the Northern Bannermen, leaving a small force at Moat Cailin to guard their retreat. They had encountered some Lannister outriders near the twins, but Walder Frey had grudgingly allowed them passage for a promise of betrothal between Robb and a Frey daughter, a matter Ned found distasteful but not surprising. Once across the Trident, Robb had avoided the main Lannister host, losing a skirmish but pressing onward to King's Landing. News of the city's plight had spurred him to take risks, orging across lesser-known roads. In short, the North was now in the city, but Tywin still blocked the farmland and supply lines. Renly pointed out the disposition of Tywin's forces, which ringed the capital on the west and north. Stannis was to the east. If the Northmen and the city's defenders attempted a sortie, and Stannis struck from the rear, they might pin Tywin between two armies. But that would require coordination with Stannis, who was notoriously aloof and might not join such a plan unless it suited him. And all the while, Cersei lurked inside with a coterie of Lannister guards. If the city erupted in chaos, she might slip away or worse, sabotage them from within. Night deepened as the council argued back and forth. Some favored launching a night attack to link with Stannis. Others urged caution, not wanting to risk an open-field battle against Tywin's hardened legions. Ultimately, Ned decided they must attempt to contact Stannis again. A messenger would be sent under a flag of truce, escorted by Northmen. Meanwhile, the city's gates would remain barred. If Tywin attempted to storm the walls while the Northmen had fewer defenders in place, that would be the end. Robb turned to his father. "We could have thousands of men on the walls. Tywin might break on them like waves on a cliff, if we can hold tight. But what about the people inside? If they riot?" Ned's expression was grim. "We must do what we can to feed them, at least a little, to stave off desperation. We can send out patrols to keep order. If you can spare some of your men, they could help keep the peace. If the city tears itself apart, Tywin won't even need to breach the walls." So the plan was laid, such as it was. Maintain the defense, attempt to parley with Stannis for a coordinated strike, and placate the starving smallfolk just enough to avoid full-scale riots. It was a fragile strategy, reliant on events falling their way. 3 days later, the messenger party to Stannis returned, bearing an official reply. King Stannis Baratheon recognized Ned Stark's position as protector, so long as Ned bent the knee to him once the city was secured, and he agreed in principle to a joint assault on Tywin's lines, provided that Ned could muster enough men to attack from within while Stannis attacked from without. Timing would be critical. A miscommunication, and Tywin could defeat them in detail. They set a tentative day for the assault, 5 days hence at first light. The intervening time stretched thin. Tywin must have sensed something was afoot, for he doubled the vigilance of his own scouts, and the city watchers saw an increase in Lannister patrols. The small folk raged with mounting fury as bread and meat grew scarcer. Robb's Northmen tried to help in distributing grain, but they were out of their depth in the twisting, overcrowded streets of King's Landing. Occasionally, groups of starving commoners fell upon wagons of provisions only to be cut down by gold cloaks or northern spears. Ned's stomach twisted at these reports, haunted by the knowledge that every day that passed, more innocents died. Outside the walls, the ring of Lannister encampments glowed at night. To the east, flickers of Stannis' campfires were visible. Ned tried to sleep, knowing the day of battle drew near, but rest was fleeting. In rare quiet moments, he checked on Sansa and Arya, who were confined to the Tower of the Hand under heavy guard. He found them both unnerved by the city's upheaval. Arya paced, longing to do more than remain caged, while Sansa prayed with desperation that some miracle would end the strife. Ned held them close, though he could offer scant reassurance, or would not spare them if the walls were breached. On the eve of the planned assault, Ned walked the battlements. A damp chill clung to the air, and clouds blotted out the stars. His retinue said that morale among the defenders was mixed. Some men were heartened by the presence of the Northmen, but others feared that Stannis might come too late or not at all. The city's garrison was low on arrows, forced to ration even the simplest supplies. And from Maegor's holdfast, there was still no word from Cersei. She remained behind locked gates, presumably with Joffrey, Pycelle, and that monstrous hound. Ned half expected a Lannister infiltration or sabotage, but so far she had remained quiet. His mind drifted to Jon, the boy he had condemned to a quiet existence as his bastard, unknowingly the blood of Targaryen kings. He prayed to the old gods that Jon was safe in Winterfell or wherever Catelyn had taken him. Perhaps across the narrow sea, Daenerys Targaryen also stirred with the dragons rumored to have hatched for her. The realm teetered under enough threats without that. Ned could only hope none of those tidings reached Tywin or Stannis to ignite some fresh conflagration. Before dawn, Ned rose from a fitful slumber. The assault was to begin at first light, or whenever Stannis gave the signal by lighting a great blaze to the east. Then, the city gates would open, and the Northmen, Stormlanders loyal to Renly, and the Goldcloaks who would fight for Ned would sally out in a wedge formation. If the gods were kind, Tywin would be caught between two forces. If they were unkind, Ned did not dwell on that outcome too long. He donned his armor in silence, Jory helping secure the straps. The battered plate felt heavy. He slid ice into its scabbard. Outside, Robb was waiting, clad in mail and plate, his dire wolf by his side. The boy tried to appear strong, but Ned saw the tension in his eyes. All around them in the courtyard, men prepared for battle, checking sword belts and harnesses. Horses snorted, stamping on the cobblestones. Torches burned in iron brackets, illuminating the hush of pre-dawn gloom. "Are we ready, father?" Robb asked, his breath steaming in the chill. "As ready as we can be," Ned answered quietly. "Watch my signals. Keep your men together. And mind your flank. Tywin will try to envelop us if we spread too thin." Renly approached, wearing the stag helm with golden antlers, a half-cape draped over his shoulder. He gave Ned a curt nod. No sign from Stannis yet, but we're nearly at first light. Ser Barristan joined them, white cloak trailing. "If I may lead the vanguard, Lord Stark, I should like to face the Lannisters in open field once more, if that's what it comes to." Ned offered him a wan smile. "I'd be honored to have you at the front, Ser Barristan. We will ride behind." The minutes dragged. Men murmured prayers to the Seven, or to the old gods, or to any spirit that might hear them. The gatehouse was manned by a robust contingent of archers and city watch. Ned and Robb formed up their mounted knights in the courtyard behind them, with Renly's Stormlanders to the right. Some crossbowmen and foot soldiers waited in the wings. Then it happened. A flicker of flame appeared beyond the eastern wall, intensifying to a brilliant orange glow. A horn sounded from the ramparts. One of the watchers shouted down, "A fire! East by south. Must be Stannis' signal." Ned looked to Renly, who nodded grimly. "That's it. We move." Ned raised a gauntlet fist. "Open the gates." The chain rattled. The portcullis lifted slowly. Outside, in the faint dawn light, the field lay under a shifting fog, but the shapes of Lannister sentries could be glimpsed. Horns rang out from the walls, summoning the assault. With a thunder of hooves, Ser Barristan led the first wave of cavalry through the Gate of the Gods. The Northmen followed, Robb at their head, Grey Wind racing alongside. Ned rode near the front, the wind cold against his exposed face. The rush of adrenaline pressed in. Around them, men shouted oaths, banners snapped, and swords were drawn with a metallic chorus. A second wave of foot soldiers followed. They galloped out onto the plain, hoofbeats pounding the wet grass. Across the mist-shrouded field, Ned saw forms of Lannister outriders reeling in surprise. Trumpets blared from the Lannister lines, answering the city's horns. Figures scrambled, mustering their own horses, rousing infantry from tents. The Red Lion banners became a swirl of motion as men raced to meet the sudden assault. Somewhere in the distance, Ned knew Stannis' force would be advancing, hopefully timed to slam into Tywin's flank. If all went according to plan, Tywin would find himself squeezed between two armies. But war was seldom so predictable. Ned breathed hard, urging his mount forward, heart hammering in his chest. This was the moment. The words of House Stark, "Winter is coming," echoed in his mind, but so too did the memory of Robert's last words, the oath he had taken on behalf of the realm. No matter what came next, honor demanded that he see this through. They clashed with the first Lannister lines in a shock of steel on steel. Barristan Selmy was a blur, his white cloak streaming behind him as he cut down a spearman. Robb's youth did not hinder him. Ned saw the boy deflect a clumsy blow and thrust back, unhorsing a Lannister knight. Grey Wind leapt onto another, savaging him. Ned parried a downward strike from a man wearing the lion crest, then countered with a slash that struck true. Screams filled the air, along with the whinny of wounded horses. On they pressed. The plan was to keep driving forward, preventing the Lannisters from forming a unified line, while Stannis hopefully crashed into their rear. An arrow hissed past Ned's head and he glimpsed Lannister archers in the distance. One lodged in the flank of a northern horse, sending it crashing with a terrible neigh. Chaos reigned. Men were trampled, the ground turning slick with mud and blood. Ned heard Renly's war cry, recognized the stag helm plunging into the fray. Lannister cavalry emerged from the fog, slamming into their flank with a clatter of lances. The fighting turned into a swirling melee. Ned had no time to look for Robb or Ser Barristan. Each second demanded that he parry, dodge, or strike. His sword arm burned. He urged his horse to keep moving, to avoid being surrounded. A Lannister man-at-arms lunged at Ned's side, pike aimed at his thigh. Ned twisted in the saddle, deflecting the blow with a quick slash that knocked the pike aside. He followed with a thrust of ice that bit through the man's mail. As the foe toppled, another was there, a bearded knight with a lion's sigil on his shield. That man's mace whirled overhead. Ned managed to block once, feeling the impact jar his entire arm, but on the second swing, the knight hammered at Ned's shield, splitting the wood. Ned pulled his horse aside just in time, swinging in return to catch the knight's helm. Blood spattered as the man fell. The swirl of battle carried Ned forward, the wedge of northern cavalry pushing deeper into Lannister territory. Through the haze and confusion, he glimpsed a wide line of crimson tents behind the immediate fray. Trumpets shrieked on all sides. The Lannisters, though surprised, were numerous and well-trained. Ned knew they could not hold out long if Stannis did not arrive soon. Then, in a lull of the melee, Ned heard a roar to the east, the clangor of steel from behind the Lannister lines. His heart leapt. It must be Stannis. The Lannisters reeled as a new force struck them on their flank. Shouts of alarm sounded. Ned urged his horse forward, rallying the Northmen. "Press them," he shouted. "Press them hard." A group of Lannister knights tried to form a shield wall, but Barristan Selmy led a furious charge, hacking through. Ned saw the white cloak splattered with gore, Selmy's face a grim mask of determination. Renly spurred his mount to follow, striking at the broken line. Men on foot scattered, some throwing down weapons to flee. Now Stannis' standard emerged from the morning mist, the crowned stag amid a field of flames carried by heavily armed knights. The newcomers crashed into the disorganized Lannister ranks. Ned spotted the tall, gaunt figure of Stannis Baratheon himself, clad in dark plate emblazoned with a red heart. His jaw was set like iron. With him rode men with fiery sigils, some brandishing curved swords that Ned did not recognize. They cut through the Lannister lines methodically. The ring of Lannisters began to break. Ned could sense the momentum shifting. If Tywin was here, Ned did not see him, but whomever commanded the Lannister force was struggling to form a coherent defense. The camp was in chaos, tents on fire, horses screaming, men running. Still, pockets of determined resistance tried to hold. The morning air rang with the clash of blades and the screams of the wounded. Ned fought his way toward the center of the battlefield, searching for Stannis or a recognized banner, wanting to coordinate before they overextended. He was accompanied by a handful of Northmen, including Jory, who was smeared with blood but still upright and fierce-eyed. At last, Ned spotted a cluster of men wearing Stannis' sigil around a tall man with a wind-burned face, presumably one of Stannis' captains. They had taken a small rise in the ground, forming a vantage over the disarrayed Lannister lines. Ned reined up, panting, his sword arm trembling from fatigue. "How fares the battle?" he called. The captain saluted with a gore-stained blade. "Victory is near, my lord hand. King Stannis is pressing westward, behind the ridge." Ned glimpsed more columns of Lannister men fleeing, pursued by mounted knights. A ragged cheer rose up among the Northmen and Stormlanders. The Lannisters who did not flee began to throw down weapons, kneeling or raising their hands in surrender. The entire plain seethed with scattered fights, but the tide had turned. Stannis had timed his assault perfectly. A fresh wave of relief washed over Ned. If they succeeded here, Tywin's siege might be broken, the city saved from starvation. But war is never so simple. He urged his horse forward, scanning for Robb. He found the boy dismounting near a cluster of wounded men, the dire wolf by his side. Robb's cheek was spattered with blood, his breath ragged, but his eyes were alive with fierce triumph. "I'm fine," Robb assured him breathlessly. "We forced them to yield or flee." Ned touched his son's shoulder. "Gods be good, stay close. This field is not yet safe." Together, they pressed on, picking their way through the carnage. Dead and dying littered the ground. Ned's heart clenched at the sight of so many bodies. In the distance, plumes of smoke rose from burning tents. Then a sudden commotion arose near the western end of the Lannister camp, a horn blast, a renewed clamor of steel. Some Lannister cavalry still intact were trying a desperate breakout. Ned saw a line of horsemen in crimson forging a path toward the open countryside. At their head was a standard bearing the Golden Lion. Tywin Lannister, no doubt. Stannis appeared riding a tall warhorse. His face was grim, his eyes dark beneath a simple helm. He spotted Ned and spurred his mount over. "Lord Stark," he said curtly, "the field is ours." Ned dipped his head in deference. "Your timing was fortuitous. They're broken." Stannis surveyed the fleeing cavalry. "Tywin escapes. We cannot let him rally. Take what men you can and pursue him." "I will do the same." Ned hesitated. He was exhausted, his horse was near spent, and many of his men had been battered by the fight. But if Tywin rallied, the war might drag on. He turned to Robb, who was listening intently. "You and I can ride after him with a few hundred fresh men, perhaps. But we must be cautious not to be lured into a trap." Stannis' face was stony. "Go then. I will secure the camp, round up prisoners. We must ensure no Lannister host remains to threaten King's Landing." Ned nodded, though worry gnawed him. "Very well." He turned to Robb, beckoned Jory. "Gather the riders who are able. We must move quickly." They set off, a swift column of mounted Northmen and Stormlanders, about 300 in total, racing across the western plain. Ahead, Tywin's cavalry thundered, raising dust clouds. At first, Ned feared they would not catch them, but some of Tywin's men looked wounded and the churned ground slowed their flight. Little by little, Ned's pursuers gained ground. Arrows flew from northern archers, taking down some stragglers. The Lannister cavalry turned briefly to fend them off, a flurry of steel on steel. Ned saw a flash of Tywin's gold-encrusted armor amidst them. The older man fought with precision, felling 2 Stormland knights who tried to close with him. Robb flanked wide with a group of riders, forcing the Lannisters to pivot. That gave Ned an opening to charge the center. For a moment, confusion reigned, horses colliding, swords clashing. Ned glimpsed Tywin locked in a melee with one of Ned's bannermen. The old lion struck the man down with a savage blow. Then Tywin's horse was spooked by Grey Wind, who snarled and leapt at its hindquarters. The horse reared and Tywin struggled to maintain control. Ned spurred forward, sword raised. Tywin regained his seat and whirled on Ned, their blades meeting in a ringing clash. Despite his age, Tywin moved with lethal skill, his strikes precise, forcing Ned to parry frantically. Ned's arms felt leaden, but he kept his guard. They exchanged blows, hooves pounding. Robb circled, trying to find an angle to help, but the swirl of other riders pressed him back. Tywin slashed at Ned's horse, but Ned jerked the reins, avoiding a crippling wound. Anger flared in Tywin's eyes. "Stubborn fool," Tywin growled, hacking at Ned's guard. "You would bring the realm to ruin for the sake of your precious truth?" Ned gritted his teeth, barely turning aside a blow that would have crushed his shield arm. "It is you who would seat a bastard on the throne," he spat. "No realm built on such a lie can stand." Tywin's mouth twisted. "We shall see whose realm stands." He thrust forward, forcing Ned to twist painfully in the saddle. Ned's shield, already battered, splintered at the edge. Sensing an opening, Tywin reared back for a finishing strike. But in that instant, Grey Wind lunged at Tywin's horse from the rear, jaws snapping. The horse shrieked, sidestepping in panic. Tywin's blow went wide, grazing Ned's shoulder plate instead of splitting his helm. Ned seized the moment to slash across Tywin's exposed flank. His sword bit into the joint of Tywin's armor. A cry of pain, and Tywin sagged, his horse stumbling. Ned tried to pull back, not wishing to be dragged down in a fall. The older man tumbled from the saddle, the horse crashing onto its side. Bloodied, Tywin rolled free, somehow retaining his sword. Ned dismounted, raising his blade. Around them, the fight was all but done. Lannister riders either cut down or taken. Dust blurred the air. Men shouted. Robb was approaching. Tywin looked up, gritting his teeth. One gauntlet hand pressed to the gash in his flank. "Then finish it, Stark," he snarled, eyes fierce with hatred. "Strike your blow for your precious King Stannis and your so-called honor." Ned held the sword poised. He thought of all the atrocities Tywin had committed, the sack of King's Landing, the murder of Rhaegar's children, more recently the brutal raids on the Riverlands, and the threat to place Joffrey on the throne despite the truth. This was a man who would never relent, never show mercy. Yet even now, Ned felt the weight of delivering a killing stroke to a wounded foe. The great lords of Westeros seldom met their end so directly. Robb slid from his horse. "Father," he said softly, eyeing Tywin's fallen form. "He's the lion. We should." "He is beaten," Ned said. "We can take him prisoner, end the siege, and let the realm see him answer for his crimes." That was justice. Or so Ned wanted to believe. Tywin managed a bitter laugh, though he was bleeding badly. "Prisoner? You think I fear that?" He spat blood. "Do as you will. The game goes on." In the end, Ned could not bring himself to slay a wounded man who could do no more harm in that moment. He gestured to Jory. "Bind him. Keep him alive if you can. We will bring him back to King's Landing to face justice." A handful of Northmen laid hands on Tywin. He offered no more struggle, though his glare was venomous. With that, the last pockets of Lannister resistance crumbled. Ned looked around the field. Fallen horses, broken lances, men moaning in the dust. Robb stood panting, sword dripping. Grey Wind prowled, muzzle red with blood. The air smelled of iron and death. Yet it was victory. By midday, the combined forces of Stannis, Ned, and Renly had secured the entire Lannister camp. Thousands of prisoners were taken, among them knights of note. The siege was ended. A portion of Tywin's army fled west, but many were cut down or captured. Tywin himself, gravely wounded, was brought under heavy guard to the Red Keep. The war was not over, far from it, but the immediate threat to King's Landing had been broken. Riding back through the Gate of the Gods, Ned felt the eyes of the small folk upon him. Men and women peered from behind doors, from alleyways. They saw the battered knights returning, the prisoner-laden wagons. Rumors spread in excited bursts that Tywin Lannister had been defeated. Some cheered, hoping this meant food and relief at last. Others cursed, having lost family in the chaos. The city was battered by hunger, but for the first time in weeks, there was a spark of hope. In the courtyard of the Red Keep, Stannis arrived soon after, accompanied by his knights. He dismounted stiffly, as if every joint ached. His face was a stone mask, yet there was triumph in his eyes. Ned dismounted to greet him. Renly and Robb stood by, the latter still gripping the reins of his lathered horse. "It is done," Stannis said. "Lord Tywin is your prisoner?" Ned nodded. "Yes. Wounded but alive. We have a large number of his knights captive as well. Good. Stannis' tone was clipped. We must see to the city. I will claim the Iron Throne by right, but first we must rid ourselves of Cersei and the boy. Where are they? Ned exhaled. She remains in Maegor's holdfast guarded. I had not the strength to seize her while Tywin laid siege. Stannis' eyes blazed. Then we shall do so at once. This city is mine now. I will not have her barricaded with that spawn of incest still claiming to rule. Renly glanced at Ned, uncertain. Ned stepped forward. I will go with you. The gold cloaks that remain will not stand against us. We can demand her surrender peacefully if possible. There will be no peace for traitors, Stannis growled. She and the boy will face a court of justice, and if the evidence stands, the boy will die. The realm must see the Targaryens and their abominations ended, and likewise any false claimants. He paused, catching Ned's uneasy expression. Do you dispute that, Stark? Ned steeled himself. I do not dispute that Joffrey has no right to the throne, but I ask that you handle the boy carefully. He is only a child, for all his sins. And for the queen, well, she should face justice indeed. But do not let it descend into butchery. Stannis' jaw tightened. I am no butcher, though my justice is harsh. Come, let us end this farce. So they gathered men, Northmen, Stormlanders, and some of Stannis' own knights, and approached Maegor's holdfast in force. The holdfast's gates were barred, but the men on the walls, once so implacable, had seen the defeat of Tywin's army and the capture of their lord. They wavered at the sight of Stannis and Ned accompanied by hundreds of armed men. Stannis bellowed a demand for the queen's surrender. For a time there was silence. Then the portcullis creaked upward. In the courtyard beyond, Ned saw Cersei Lannister standing with a handful of red-cloaked guards, Joffrey at her side. The boy's face was pale, his lips pressed together in fury or fear. Sandor Clegane loomed behind them, helm under one arm. Pycelle hovered near, wringing his hands, and a few minor courtiers looked on anxiously. Stannis strode forward, helm off, eyes hard. Cersei Lannister, he said, voice echoing off the stones. In the name of King Stannis of House Baratheon, true heir to the Iron Throne, I command you to yield. Cersei's green eyes flashed. You mean to kill my son? How can any mother yield to that? Joffrey spoke up, voice shaking. I am the king, he cried. You have no right. Stannis cut him off. You are nothing. Your father was Jaime Lannister, making you a product of incest, and no heir of Robert Baratheon. The realm will not suffer you to remain. Cersei's lips twitched. The realm suffers many things it does not desire, Stannis. Her gaze shifted to Ned. So this is your doing, Stark? You swore to protect Robert's children, yet you betray his own blood. Ned felt an icy stab in his chest. I only reveal the truth, Cersei. You cannot deny what is known. Surrender and let the boy face a fair trial. Perhaps his life might be spared. I cannot say. You dare speak of fairness? She hissed. Robert was a drunken lout who fathered bastards across the realm. Why is my child less worthy than any of them? Stannis' patience frayed. He gestured to his knights. Seize them. Sandor Clegane stepped forward, hand on his sword. Try it, and I'll cut you in half, he growled. Yet there were too many. Even the Hound could not hold off an entire army. The Lannister guards braced, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. Still, Cersei looked ready to fight to the last. Tension crackled in the courtyard. Then Pycelle intervened, stepping forward, arms raised. Your Grace, my lords, please. Enough blood has been spilled. Let them yield. Let the city see some measure of mercy. Cersei ignored the old man. She locked eyes with Ned one final time. Traitors, all of you, she said softly. Then her facade cracked, a flicker of desperation shining through. Joffrey, run, she whispered. But the boy was frozen. Two of Stannis' men rushed in, swords drawn. Sandor snarled and met them, steel crashing. In an instant, the courtyard exploded into violence. The Lannister guards tried to defend the Queen and Joffrey, but they were few. Blades flashed, shouts rang. Ned stepped forward, wanting to end the bloodshed quickly. Sandor struck down one knight, but another took him in the side with a spear. The Hound cursed, blood staining his surcoat. He reeled battered. Joffrey cowered behind him, eyes wide. Cersei shrieked, grabbing a dagger from a fallen guard. She lunged at one of Stannis' knights, slashing wildly. The man caught her arm, twisting the dagger free. She struggled like a cornered animal. Stannis advanced with cold wrath. "Restrain her," he commanded. Another pair of knights grabbed Cersei, forcing her to her knees. Joffrey tried to flee, but was seized by Renly's men. The boy wailed, thrashing. In moments, it was done. Cersei and Joffrey disarmed, Sandor bleeding on the ground, the Lannisters subdued. Stannis gazed down at them with no pity in his eyes. "Bring them to the throne room," he ordered. "I will pass judgment." Ned stood in silence, heart heavy. This was the culmination of everything, the secret he had revealed, the vow to Robert, the monstrous deception of Cersei. Now it would end in a public reckoning. One corner of his mind whispered, "Remember what Robert said, that no Targaryen must sit the throne." But Jon was safe in the north. Let that remain hidden. Let the realm have some measure of peace now. Under guard, the captives were taken through the Red Keep's corridors into the Great Hall. Word spread like lightning, and the hall filled with courtiers, soldiers, and small folk who crowded in to witness. Torches blazed, their light reflecting off the Iron Throne's twisted swords. The stench of sweat, blood, and fear thickened the air. Stannis ascended the dais, aided by a few of his men. He stood beside the Iron Throne but did not seat himself yet. Cersei, still disheveled, knelt in chains. Joffrey was forced to his knees beside her. Pycelle, shaking like a leaf, stood off to one side, flanked by guards. Renly and Barristan stood near, the latter with a torn white cloak, battered by the day's battle. Robb hovered behind Ned, tensely watching. The hall quieted. Stannis' voice cut through the hush. "Cersei of House Lannister, you stand accused of high treason, incest, and the forging of false heirs to the throne of the Seven Kingdoms. Joffrey Waters, bastard of Jaime Lannister, you likewise stand accused of usurping the rightful crown and conspiring to murder those who would reveal your parentage. Do you deny these charges?" Cersei's gaze smoldered with hatred. Joffrey shook, on the verge of tears or rage. Finally, Cersei managed to speak. "I deny nothing," she spat. "You are a plague upon this realm, Stannis. I only regret that I cannot see you die as well." Stannis' expression remained impassive. "So be it. I am the lawful king by virtue of Robert Baratheon's death without trueborn issue. The punishment for these crimes is death." A ripple of apprehension moved through the crowd. Ned saw Joffrey trembling, heard the boys whimper. Despite all the monstrous cruelty Joffrey had shown, it was a terrible thing to witness a child facing his death. Cersei shouted, trying to shield him, but the knights held her fast. She spat, cursed them all, clung to Joffrey's hand. Stannis lifted his hand to halt the knights. "Let it not be said that I am unjust. Eddard Stark, you knew Robert better than most. Come forward." Ned stepped forward slowly, uncertain what Stannis intended. The eyes of the hall fixed upon him. Stannis spoke in a clear voice. "Lord Eddard, you have championed the truth of Joffrey's parentage from the start, fulfilling your vow to Robert to defend the realm. Is there any reason these two should be spared? Speak, if you would." Ned's mouth went dry. He looked at Joffrey, the golden-haired boy trembling in chains, then at Cersei's fierce green eyes. She glared at him, mouth twisted in bitterness. He thought of Sansa, once betrothed to this boy, and Arya, who had seen the cruelty Joffrey was capable of. He remembered Robert's fury and hatred for House Targaryen, how Robert had wanted them all put to the sword for fear of a pretender. Now a Lannister pretender lay exposed. The realm demanded justice. Yet was it justice to kill a child, however cruel, for the sins of his parents? "He is but a boy," Ned said, his voice rough. "He has done hateful things, yes, but he was taught to believe he was a prince. Might you send him to the wall to live out his days in service?" It was a bold plea, but Ned's conscience would not allow him to remain silent. Cersei let out a derisive laugh through her tears. "As if you would show mercy, traitors, the lot of you." Stannis' face was unreadable. "The boy is old enough to have committed atrocities in my brother's name. He is no babe in the cradle." His gaze slid over to Joffrey, who quailed. "Yet for the sake of Lord Stark's plea, I will consider exile or the wall. But first let us hear the boy's own words. Joffrey Waters, do you deny your crimes?" Joffrey stared, lips parted. He looked from Cersei to the knights. Blood trickled from a cut on his temple. Fear and fury warred in his eyes. I am the king," he mumbled, voice trembling. "You can't do this to me. I am the king. My father." Stannis barked, "Your father was Jaime Lannister. Do not speak Robert's name. If you have aught to say that might spare your life, say it now." Joffrey swallowed, tears welling. Then, in a tremulous rush, he said, "You're all traitors. I'll have your heads on spikes." The boy never finished. Stannis' face went flinty. "Guards," he commanded. Remove the boy. Take him to a cell. I will decide on the morrow whether he lives or dies." The guard seized Joffrey, dragging him away as he screamed and kicked. Cersei screeched after him, "Joffrey, I'll not let you harm him." She thrashed in her chains, but a gauntlet fist forced her down. Stannis regarded her coldly. "As for you, Cersei, you are of age and full knowledge. You have broken the realm's peace, committed incest, and crowned a bastard. I do not see reason to grant mercy." He gestured to a headsman standing by. "Take her to the black cells until I give the word." Cersei was hauled upright, defiance shining in her eyes. She spat in Stannis' face. Then she was dragged off, cursing them all. The hall rang with tension. Some watchers wept in sympathy, others cheered. Ned felt no triumph. Only a weary sense that justice, once begun, could be as brutal as war. Stannis turned to the assembled throng. "Hear me now. By the grace of the gods and by the blood of House Baratheon, I claim the Iron Throne. This city is mine, and all who would keep the king's peace are welcome. Those who spurn me or name Joffrey the rightful king are traitors." He mounted the Iron Throne steps. The great seat of swords loomed. Stannis studied it for a moment, then sat, the metal edges scraping his plate. A hush fell. In that instant, it was done. The Targaryen seat, once taken by Robert, now passed to Stannis' stern rule. Ned bowed, as did many in the hall. Renly hesitated, but then offered a stiff inclination of his head. Robb lowered himself respectfully. Stannis' expression revealed no joy, only a grim determination. "I am king," he declared. "We shall restore order. The city shall be fed. Lord Stark, as my hand, see it done. Renly, you shall serve as master of laws. We have a realm to rebuild." And so it began. The war was not ended entirely. Tywin's lesser forces still roamed. Other lords might resist Stannis, but the siege was lifted, the false king cast down. King's Landing buzzed with the promise of a new reign, though overshadowed by famine, poverty, and the memory of slaughter. In the days that followed, Tywin Lannister, too weak from his wound to resist, was forced to bend the knee or face execution. He did so with ill grace, but Stannis kept him alive in the dungeons until such time as a formal trial could be convened. Jaime Lannister, absent and still serving as a king's guard for Robert in the original timeline, was nowhere near. Rumors placed him near Riverrun or the Golden Tooth. With Tywin's downfall, many in the West might yet rebel or attempt to free him. For Ned Stark, a strange peace descended. He walked the halls of the Red Keep as the newly confirmed hand of King Stannis, carrying out orders to restore grain distribution, quell pockets of unrest, and unify the city guard under a single command. Robb prepared to lead his Northmen back home once matters stabilized, though some parted ways to chase down Lannister outlaws. All the while, Ned carried one last secret: Jon's parentage. Robert had forced a confession from him, yet Robert was gone. Stannis, for his part, hated Targaryens as fiercely as Robert once had. If he discovered that Ned harbored Rhaegar's son for all these years, would he react with the same lethal intent Robert once displayed? Ned dared not test it. He had accomplished one victory, saving the realm from Joffrey's false rule. Now he must keep another promise, the one he had made to Lyanna Stark. So each day, Ned wrote letters to Winterfell, ensuring that Jon remained safe. He told Catelyn nothing of the truth, only that the boy must never come south. If Stannis reigned for decades, Ned would keep Jon hidden until the day the boy could decide his own fate. With luck, it would remain a secret. If not, Ned did not care to dwell on that possibility. One war had ended, or at least paused. Another could ignite if a Targaryen were discovered living under the Stark banner. One moon's turn after Stannis' coronation, Ned stood once again at the window of the Tower of the Hand, gazing over the city. Rebuilding efforts had begun, though many scars remained. The small folk no longer starved en masse, thanks to shipments of grain from the Reach, encouraged, no doubt, by Stannis' stern demands. The City Watch, consolidated under a new commander loyal to Stannis, patrolled the streets, stamping out crime. Tywin languished in a cell, awaiting trial, while Joffrey's fate hung in the balance. Some said Stannis would have him sent to the wall, others that he would be quietly put to death. Cersei had already met the executioner's axe on the steps of the Great September, an end that had drawn thousands of onlookers. Ned felt no joy in that memory. He had stood by, silent, as the headsman's sword fell. Stannis had insisted the city witness the wages of treason. Perhaps that was justice, or perhaps it was simply one more cruelty in a realm drowning in them. When Ned closed his eyes, he sometimes heard Cersei's final scream, saw the light die in her eyes. It was no easy thing to be an instrument of law. But the realm endured. A new king was crowned, and for now the Seven Kingdoms did not collapse into total civil war. Dorne had yet to declare openly for Stannis, but they remained quiet. The Vale still kept a distance, but Lisa Arryn sent cautious congratulations. The West simmered with discontent, but with Tywin captured, their aggression was muted. The Freys congratulated themselves on having betrothed a daughter to Robb. Thus was the Game of Thrones played, even in the aftermath of so much death. Sansa and Arya prepared to leave for Winterfell with Robb, each reacting differently to the calamities they had witnessed. Sansa was subdued and pale, still mourning the illusions she had once cherished about becoming a princess. Arya was restless, eager to return north, though she had gleaned new steel in her spine from watching the city's violence. They would leave in a fortnight, escorted by Stark men. Ned would remain behind for a time, fulfilling his duties to King Stannis, ensuring that the capital was set on a stable path. Then, eventually, he would return home, or so he hoped. Perhaps he would see Jon once more, watch the boy grow into a man unburdened by the secrets of his blood. That evening, Ned dined briefly with Stannis and Renly in the Great Hall, a cold affair of minimal conversation and no laughter. Afterward, Stannis summoned him for a private word. They stood near a column in the throne room, the Iron Throne looming behind them. Torches flickered, casting long shadows on the ancient floor. "You have served faithfully, Lord Hand," Stannis said, voice echoing. "Though our alliance began in war, you have shown yourself true. The city is calmer now, though there is much to do." Ned inclined his head. "I serve the realm and memory of my friend Robert." Stannis's eyes narrowed slightly. "Yes, Robert. In his final hours, you said, he learned of the boy's bastardy. He did not name Joffrey heir, nor did he name you. He named me. That is a truth we must ensure the realm remembers." He paused. "I only wonder, Stark, what other truths you might be hiding." Robert spoke in his delirium of Targaryens. "Something about a boy you kept. Do you recall?" Ned felt his pulse quicken. "He was delirious, Your Grace. He hated Targaryens with a consuming passion. Perhaps in that delirium, he confused events of the rebellion." He kept his voice carefully steady. Stannis studied him. "Perhaps so. I would know if any Targaryen scion remained in Westeros, though. If that should ever come to light, I trust you would speak the truth." His tone carried a warning. Ned forced himself to meet the king's gaze without flinching. "I have always spoken the truth, Your Grace." Then CT. "Had you continue," Stannis said. "I will not have another Targaryen upstart disturbing this realm." Ned bowed. "I understand. That was the end of it." Stannis dismissed him, the threat unspoken but clear. Ned returned to his solar, a new weight on his heart. Stannis had gleaned some hint from Robert, enough to suspect a hidden Targaryen. For now, he seemed satisfied with Ned's denial. But the memory of those words lingered. "If that should ever come to light, I trust you would speak the truth." In the days that followed, Ned oversaw the city's restoration. He said farewell to Robb, Sansa, and Arya, sending them north with an escort. Each moment of parting was bittersweet, for though they left behind a city thick with ghosts, they returned to the homeland that might yet provide peace. He pressed a final letter into Robb's hand, instructing him to give it to Maester Luwin in Winterfell, that Jon might remain safe and ignorant of certain truths. Robb, though curious, did not pry. He had seen enough secrets unravel to trust his father's judgment. When the Northmen departed, Ned remained his hand, walking a narrow line between Stannis' unwavering justice and the realm's fragile hopes for recovery. Tywin awaited trial, Joffrey remained in the dungeons, and the small folk still nursed their wounds. But King's Landing was no longer besieged, no longer under the shadow of a false king. The Game of Thrones continued, a new chapter begun. Sometimes, late at night, Ned paced in his chambers, remembering Lyanna's face, her plea, "Promise me." He had revealed the truth to Robert. That truth had toppled a crown of lies, sparked war, and led to Cersei's grisly end. Yet Jon lived, and for now, the realm was spared the knowledge of a Targaryen heir in the north. Ned told himself that if the day ever came when Jon's heritage must be revealed, it would be Jon's choice, and it would be for a cause more worthy than another round of bloodshed. Until then, Ned would keep the boy's secret as he had for 15 years, shielding him from the iron jaws of kings who knew only fear and fury. He looked out over the city from the Tower of the Hand, the wind ruffling his graying hair. In the harbor, new ships arrived from the Reach with food. In the streets, bakeries reopened. Men labored to rebuild the markets, carting away rubble from the riots. A hush of hope mingled with the memory of death. Another winter would come someday, yes, but perhaps there would be a spring first and some measure of respite. Ned Stark stood there, thinking of all that had happened since that day he first arrived in King's Landing to serve as Robert's hand. So many treacheries unmasked, so many casualties claimed. Yet through it all, he had clung to his honor and to the truth that Jon was not his son. If it had cost him friends, allies, or illusions, so be it. He was a Stark of Winterfell, and he had done as he must. Far away in the north, Jon Snow, Jon Targaryen, grew, never knowing the storms that had raged around his name. The realm might see more wars and more kings, more lies and more truths. But for now, a fragile calm descended upon the city of King's Landing, a respite from the chaos that had threatened to consume them all. And Ned Stark, the quiet man who had tried to do right by his sister's final wish, breathed in the chill dawn air and thought that, for this day at least, he could watch the sun rise without shame. The realm had found a precarious balance. He only prayed it would hold until the next inevitable turn of the wheel, when secrets and crowns and destinies would once more clash in the great, bloody Game of Thrones.